Good morning. Welcome to the July 21st, 2022 meeting of the CalHFA Board of Directors. Today's meeting is being streamed live and will be recorded for public viewing after the meeting. The video recording and the meeting materials will be and are available on the CalHFA website, which is calhfa.ca.gov. You can also find those materials in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control screen. Also, there will be an opportunity, today in that board package and on the control panel under the handouts, there is a public comment guide. And I just want to let the public know that there will be an opportunity for public comment during the meeting. We will ask you to use the raised hand function, and there'll be more instructions later on. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to the chair, Ms. Delilah Sotelo.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everybody on camera. You're all stars in my eyes. So welcome again to our virtual meetings and welcome to the public to our virtual meeting. With that, Melissa, let's go ahead and get started with a quick roll call.
Ms. Avila Farias.
Here.
Ms. Cabildo.
Here.
Mr. Cervantes.
Here.
Dr. Imbasiani.
Present.
Mr. Starr for Treasurer Ma.
Present.
Mr. Seeley for Mr. Velasquez. I'm not hearing Mr. Seeley. Okay, I believe Mr. Seeley's here, but we'll come back to that shortly. Mr. Prince.
I am here.
Thank you. Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Present.
Mr. Russell.
Present.
Chair Sotelo.
Present.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Acefa.
This is Ryan Silber standing in for Director Acefa until we'll be joining later today.
I'm bringing him over right now.
Thank you. Ms. Miller for Ms. Bosler. Not hearing Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller is absent. Ms. Johnson Hall.
Good morning, I'm here.
Okay, let's try Mr. Seeley or Mr. Velasquez for HCD. Okay, I do not hear that. Mr. Velasquez is absent. And Mr. Acefa, are you now able to?
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know. Can you? I'm not sure about the camera. Oh yeah, there it is. Great.
Great.
Thanks.
We'll mark you present. And with that, Chair Sotelo, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for attending and making time for our meeting today. Our objective is to get through the meeting as openly and transparently as possible, but also as expeditiously as possible. So we're hoping, I know we lose some folks at about 11:30. So I wanted to make sure that folks knew that we were going to try to get through the agenda. So with that, we have our first agenda item is the approval of the meeting minutes, Melissa. I think there was an addendum to reflect that there was absence of Mr. Cervantes in the minutes. So I think that should be reflected in the minutes. But with that, are there any other changes or comments? Okay. Do I hear a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Anna Marie, thank you, and a second by Maria Cabildo. All in favor?
Aye.
Do we, Melissa, do you want to do roll call, or can we just do by consent?
I think let's do roll call. It's a little bit easier in this environment.
Okay,
So I'll
so
run through
Claire,
them.
make sure we have everybody called on roll call. Go ahead, Melissa. Thank you.
Ms. Avila Farias,
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo,
Yes.
Mr. Cervantes,
I will abstain as I wasn't at the meeting.
Dr. Imbasciani,
Yes.
Mr. Starr,
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez,
Yes.
Mr. Prince,
Yes.
Mr. Russell,
I'll abstain as I was not present.
Chair Sotelo,
Yes.
Mr. White.
Yes.
Chair Sotelo, the minutes from the May 26th meeting with the correction noted has been approved.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it. So with that, we're going to turn to a quick report on my end, and then turn it over to Ms. Johnson Hall for her executive director comments. I did want to acknowledge that we have Mr. Stephen Russell back with us. He's rejoined the board. He's an appointee of the Senate Rules Committee. So welcome back, Stephen. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I hope I cannot begin to replace the institutional wisdom that Mr. Hunter brought, but I'm very pleased to be back here and to speak on behalf of our sector. Thank you for.
I'm so grateful for you mentioning that, because I just do want to acknowledge again the work of Mr. Hunter. He was with us over 13 years. So he had an incredible presence, incredible institutional memory, and he really carried us through so many of our evolving, transitioning times. So if you're listening, Mr. Hunter, thank you, thank you, thank you. I wanted to also report to the board that we have, that Elaine Gallagher has stepped down. She's moved on from the board. So we are looking to, replace that position, but I did want to acknowledge the wonderful work that Eileen had done during her tenure here at the board. And again, thank her publicly for that. She was always a great advocate, and we appreciated her time. Also, we have a new member. We have an incoming director of the Department of Finance who has not quite been appointed, or it has been appointed, but it is not active yet. His name is Joe Steffenshaw, and he will be joining the board as an ex officio role. He takes the place of Keeley, who is probably already retired or moved on. So we'll see him in August here at the board. Hopefully we'll be live and in person, but for right now we're looking forward to seeing him. Anyway, so with that, I just did want to acknowledge everybody on that, acknowledge the folks that have moved on and welcome folks back. And I think the only other thing that I have to report to the board is just, thank you again for folks that have stepped up and have been present at groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings. And I would just encourage you to keep in touch with Ms. Johnson Hall and with Ms. Flores about any opportunities to go out there and outreach to constituents throughout the state of California and celebrate all these wonderful openings and groundbreakings that we're having. I keep hearing Ms. Johnson, Miss Johnson Hall's name everywhere, so I know she is out and about and traveling. So it's really great to know that we're out there. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ms. Johnson Hall, for your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the board again for your attendance today. And thank you for all of those members of the public who are also attending. We know that you could use your time is very important and sensitive these days. And we're just happy that you're here to hear some of the great work of the California Housing Finance Agency. Speaking of great work, last month, CalHFA was invited to speak at 2 different project celebrations, one grand opening and one groundbreaking. The first, what took place was the ground opening for the Valencia Point, where CalHFA multifamily staff member Kevin Brown was part of a lineup of speakers that also included the San Diego Mayor, Todd Gloria. This was an extra special moment for CalHFA because Valencia Point is the very first project funded through our MIP program to have a grand opening celebration. And I suspect we'll have a lot more as they are all starting to come online. CalHFA made the commitment on the MIP loan in June of 2020 to help finance this 102-unit development, which serves a mix of income levels between 40 and 80% of area median income. And then on June 30th, CalHFA was invited to speak at the groundbreaking for the Kelsey Air Station in San Jose. Our very own Anna Marie Avila Farias stepped up. She represented CalHFA for this event, and she was able to speak alongside San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo, among many others. So I want to say thank you, Anna Marie, for stepping in for me at the very last minute. It was so wonderful to have you there, and I have to say, we had some confidential conversations where she said she was so excited to be there, and I was so excited to have you there because this is in fact a very special project named after a small child who with disabilities who and that is what the focus of this project is. It is to the finished product will include 115 restricted units, also a mix of incomes between 20 and 80% of AMI, and 25% of the apartments will be reserved for people with disabilities in her honor. Not only is this another MIP project, but CalHFA also issued the bonds, and we are also serving as the permanent lender on this project. We've got a couple of things to celebrate that I want to share, administrative things. One, most important, I want to call to the board's attention some very good news. Last month, our former Deputy Controller, Oksana Glushenko, has taken over as controller on a permanent basis. We continue to do everything we can to keep our important staff positions filled, and it doesn't go without challenges, believe you, in this environment, but we were able to keep her as our top fiscal officer. And additionally, I am thrilled that Oksana, who has been with CalHFA for now 23 years, has been the deputy to our former controller, Laura Hamahashi, since 2016. For those of you who don't know Oksana, I encourage you to get to know her. She is one of the most committed persons on our team. She always has a little candy for me to keep me straight. And she is just a wonderful person to work with. She's going to be an incredible asset to CalHFA in her new role, and we're excited for her. One last minute thing that I want to mention while we're celebrating is I want to congratulate Mr. Fred White, who is now Dr. Frederick White. And just learned that yesterday, but I think we should pause and celebrate with him as he moves in. He's earned this PhD, and if we have a moment, I would love for him to speak to that at the Delilah, at your discretion.
Yeah, let's hear from him now. I'm excited.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind, Dr. Frederick White. The floor is yours, please. And I'll come back.
Sure. I'll keep this brief. Thank you, Tina. I appreciate that. I am very excited that I got past that stage last month, defending my dissertation. My research is specifically a doctorate in business administration, but it focuses on increasing institutional asset owner capital into mixed income housing. And if any of you had any conversations with me, my background is in the institutional investor world, life insurance companies, pension funds, endowments, and I focused on looking at perceptions and motivations and an appetite from that bucket of capital into investing into mixed income housing, and had very strong, significant results that my committee and myself actually hope to publish. And I'm willing to share this with you all as soon as I graduate, which will be next Sunday, the July 31st. But very excited. I feel like I've literally pressed restart, and you know, I'm going to move forward with that work and continue my work here. So thank you.
Congratulations. It's fantastic to have you on the board, and then to have you here in Los Angeles working on so many important projects. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Fred, I just want to say a couple of things. We haven't met before, but it's great to hear. I wrote my thesis on income mixing in public housing in the early 90s, so I'd love to compare notes with you at some point.
Sounds great.
Great. Okay,
Well,
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, congratulations, Dr. White. As for me, I was in San Diego earlier this week speaking on a panel at the National Housing and Rehabilitation Association, their Summer Institute. This was a great conversation where I was joined by Nancy Robles from CIDLAC, TCAC, and the director of the Arizona Department of Housing to talk about strategies for dealing with current economic realities of financing affordable housing. So again, great conversation, which I enjoyed immensely, and more on that effort as we come up with some creative ideas to address affordable housing and thinking about creativity. Last but definitely not least, I want to talk briefly about California Dream for All, which we will get into more detail later on with Ellen and Francis, which is item number 9 in your agenda. But as a bit of background, I have mentioned at the last 2 board meetings, I believe, how Governor Newsom's administration and the state legislature have been increasingly depending on CalHFA to act as an innovator and as a leader in accomplishing the state's housing goals. One of these goals is affordable homeownership. Therefore, last year, state budget provided funds to the California State Treasurer's Office to research and develop the framework for a homeownership program and present that report to the legislature. Under the leadership of Treasurer Fiona Ma, the STO partnered with California Forward to create this report, with CalHFA, providing technical assistance. Ultimately, that led to a $500 million investment as part of this year's final state budget. And Senate President Pro Tem Toni Atkins has been a real champion for this program, so we thank her for her leadership. CalHFA has been tasked with designing and implementing this new home buyer assistance program called California Dream for All. I have to believe that we were chosen because of the ongoing success we have had with our existing homeownership program. And as you may have seen, we recently sent out a press release celebrating the more than 5,600 California families we have helped become homeowners in fiscal year 21-22. We have already started the prep work for the new Dream for All program, which includes figuring out all the program design details, top to bottom. And the legislation has provided a very broad framework, which is how the program should provide payment assistance in the form of shared appreciation loans. That's the new thing that I think makes this program pivotal in addressing homeownership long-term for the state of California. Now, this will be another huge lift for CalHFA, but I know that our staff is up to the challenge. And most importantly, It will provide a huge benefit for tens of thousands of California residents, especially those that have been historically underserved and will now have the opportunity to achieve the dream of home ownership, many of them for the very first time. This will start the path toward intergenerational wealth, which is so important to the success of this program. This is why I mentioned this program has strong support from not only the legislature, but the administration and the treasurer's office. Since it's been such a collaborative effort to get to this point, I would like to open up to Secretary Castro Ramirez, as well as Mr. Starr, on behalf of the Treasurer Ma, in case they want to provide any additional statements about this program. And then post that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Johnson Hall. Thank you for your leadership. And I completely agree with your statement regarding the tremendous capacity of CalHFA, the ongoing success with expanding housing opportunity both in the rental and in the homeownership sector. And of course, the administration, the governor is delighted to see a $500 million investment to further homeownership through the Dream for All. Definitely want to acknowledge the leadership of Treasurer Ma in terms of leading the study group that led to recommendations that enabled the legislature and the governor to be able to design this budget that includes $500 million. Of course, beyond the $500 million for the Dream for All program, there is also $350 million in the Housing and Community Development Program department, I should say, for the Cal Home program. And I know you share this quite often with all of us, Executive Director, about how important it is that we take a look at the entire housing ecosystem. And that means ensuring that we're continuing to do our best to prevent and end homelessness. So I'm very excited that the budget also includes $10.2 billion over 2 years to continue that focus on prevention and also moving more quickly to house individuals experiencing homelessness. Another important component for us, as you all know, is the preservation of housing affordability and expanding the production of rental housing. And so to that end, the budget that the governor signed has $11.2 billion in funding for housing production, preservation, and a number of other efforts, much of which are led by HCD, CalHFA, and a few others. And now, with the signature piece of the Dream for All, we are going to double down on ways to more quickly connect households to homeownership opportunities. I really believe that homeownership is more than just owning a home. Homeownership is about laying roots, being part of a neighborhood, having a level of financial and family security. And also, as we know, it's also about generational wealth. And very much appreciate the work that CalHFA has done in the past as it relates to addressing the gaps that exist, particularly among Black families that are not able to reach for the American dream, and just families of color in general. So we're excited that CalHFA will be leading the charge. I'm anxious with hearing more about how your team, Executive Director, will be designing the program, launching the program. And I think through these meetings that we have, it's a great opportunity for us to hear the progress that you're all making. So I look forward to future reports from you. And I will turn it over to Noah.
Thank you so much, Secretary and Executive Director Johnson Hall, for the opportunity to say a couple words today. At the Treasurer's Office, we tend to work very tirelessly to provide the financial resources to support the construction, rehabilitation, and preservation of affordable multifamily construction. But we all know that our housing challenges are much more expansive than just the construction, preservation, and rehabilitation of those types of projects. And this program, I believe, recognizes and addresses another pressing need in that space, which is that the rate of appreciation of home prices is far outpacing the rate at which younger families and first-time home buyers can accumulate a down payment. So obviously, the Treasurer's Office has been spearheading the design and development of the framework for this program. And we are so thrilled that this report has recently been tendered to legislative leadership, that appropriation has been made to CalHFA to run this program. But one more comment, and I think this is very important, is that this is a moment where you can see a shared priority amongst both legislative leadership, the Treasurer's Office, and the administration through CalHFA, and I just think that's very important to note. And so we're really looking forward to working together towards this California Dream for All program. So thank you so much.
Ms. Johnson Hall, did you want to conclude, or may I go ahead and
Madam Chair, thank you so much. I am done, and thank you to Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez as well as Director Starr for your comments.
Excuse me, Chair Sotelo, I just wanted to acknowledge that Director Velasquez has joined us during the last segment.
Welcome, Director. I did want to, again, thank you, Secretary Castro Ramirez, and thank you, Director Starr. We, I think, are very excited about hearing all of the particular elements, and I know board members will have questions and ideas about implementation and outreach. So I just ask Ms. Johnson Hall and staff to make sure that in our next meeting we have some time to hear an update from you on how the rollout and the implementation is going, and it gives board members an opportunity to ask and engage in the development and the consideration of any policy issues related to the program. It is such a huge effort, and what a great accomplishment by the governor and the legislature to move this forward, and Treasurer Ma. So congratulations. It's real public benefit work that you guys have done. So thank you so much for entrusting that vision and that work to CalHFA, and we will not let you down, right? So with that, board members, I know you probably have lots of questions, and we will certainly engage, and I think later on today you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about some of our other programs, single family programs. But with that, let's go ahead to item number 4. This item, I'm sure most of the board members are familiar with the topic. This is our board member code of conduct. This is the third time we're seeing it, so I believe that the third time is the charm, and I will let our board secretary Claire walk us through the updates and the modifications that were made from our last visit with the code. But this is fundamental to the work that we do and to the public trust that we have to make sure that we manage and just present to the public. So with that, Claire, why don't you go ahead, and if you're ready, over to you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is Tina Johnson Hall for the record. I have decided that I would like to pull this from the agenda today. And I've been informed that there may be some other things that we might want to take a look at here. And so with the board's permission, I would like to pull this item, and we will bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay, so let's go ahead and table this then, and I appreciate the behind the scenes work on this. So with that, let's go ahead and move to item number 5. This is an action item for the NMS Counseling Fund augmentation. Claire, I understand that you and Kathy Phillips are presenting on this agenda for the National Mortgage Settlement Counseling Funding. If you guys are both ready, let's go ahead and turn this over to you.
Thank you, Chair Sotelo. Kathy's going to go ahead and take the lead, and then I will follow her. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
I apologize, Claire. I just wanted to make sure that we were following Robert's rules regarding pulling an agenda item, if that required a vote.
No, ma'am, it does not. You did it appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's not pulling, it's tabling, just to be clear, Ms. Johnson Hall, the terminology is tabling. Thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, Chair Sotelo and members of the board. As mentioned, I'm Kathy Phillips. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications. Claire and I are here to present to you an update on the National Mortgage Settlement Housing Counseling Program and to request your approval for additional funds, which Claire will explain in just a few moments. I'll start by offering just a little background on the program for some of our newest board members and to update you on how the program is performing. So the governor's 2021 budget allocated $300 million to CalHFA from the National Mortgage Settlement Fund for the purpose of providing housing counseling services by HUD certified counselors to homeowners, former homeowners, or renters, and to provide mortgage assistance to qualified California households. In August of 2020, CalHFA, with the board's approval in Resolution 2015, prioritized the use of $50 million to set up the statewide NMS Housing Counseling Program to ensure that struggling Californians have access to free expert advice on saving their homes and staying housed. Subsequently, CalHFA contracted with 3 HUD certified intermediaries whose primary role is to oversee and monitor compliance of the counseling activities for dozens of individual housing counseling agencies throughout California. The NMS counseling program launched in November of 2020. Next slide, please. Per the program terms, the housing counseling agencies receive $750 per eligible counseling session and will allow up to 2 sessions with a maximum of $1,500 per household. The intermediaries will receive 12.5% of their total allocated grant for operational and compliance oversight costs. Next slide. Additionally, the program aimed to help strengthen and solidify California's housing counseling network through capacity building funds so that this network was able to prepare and provide these vital services to Californians into the future. With these funds, housing counseling agencies were able to upgrade their outdated technology systems to better respond to the necessary and rapid shift from in-person counseling to virtual counseling during the pandemic. And they were able to hire additional counselors and staff, among other things. Next slide, please. Additionally, the program prioritizes reaching socially disadvantaged and underserved communities. Then in late 2021, CalHFA launched the federally funded Mortgage Relief Program, which frequently refers its applicants to the Housing Counselor Network for additional assistance. In preparation for the potential increase of counseling services needed, staff requested and the board approved in Resolution 2114 an additional allocation of up to $23.5 million to assist with this expected increase in clients. Next slide. The agency is very pleased so far with the performance of the NMS counseling program. And since the program launched, and as of the most recent report, which is the quarter ending March of 2022, it has served more than 30,000 households. We've distributed more than $44 million, and 80% of the households served were low or very low income. Next slide. When looking at diversity, the program is for the most part serving households that either meet or exceed the race and ethnicity makeup of California. We watch these numbers closely and adjust our marketing and outreach efforts to ensure that we appropriately are reaching these underserved communities. Next slide. And finally, this is a look at the number of households who were provided these types of counseling sessions that may deal specifically with housing hardships. So that is performance. And now I'm going to turn it over to Claire, who's going to discuss the funding disbursements, and then what we're looking at as we head into the next 12 months of the program.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, board members, members of the public. So glad that you're here today. The 3 intermediaries that are contracted with CalHFA to deliver the housing counseling services are varied. They're very different in terms of the size of their networks. This is great for inclusion and equality and making sure that communities that are socially disadvantaged are being served by this program. But as a result of the variation in the sizes of the counseling networks that are underneath each intermediary, the fund distribution amount was not level. So each award of funds was not the exact same. It was based upon projections for counseling units to be conducted and the size of the network. So we made a proportional distribution of those funds. The NMS staff assessed a multitude of factors along with the proposals that were submitted by the intermediaries at the inception of the program, and projected how many households each housing counseling agency could serve, and then allocated those grants proportionally. Although each set of housing counseling agencies are performing above expected standards, in terms of diversity and services, and in terms of assisting a wide range of housing related challenges that Californians are experiencing. One in particular, Home Free USA, is exhausting their funding more quickly than the other 2. They have actually exceeded projections so far that they are nearly out of funding this quarter. So, because there continues to obviously be a strong need for the kind of housing counseling that's being offered, and we'd like to ensure that Home Free USA can continue delivering those services with NMS funding through the conclusion of the, or the expected conclusion of the program, which will be June 2023. As such, Kathy and I are before you today to ask the board to please replenish Home Free USA's funding in the amount of $18 million. It should be noted that now that we have more than 5 quarters of data around the housing counseling being delivered, we were able to analyze the actual numbers of services and therefore determine a realistic amount of funding needed to carry Home Free USA's operation through June 2023. Thank you so much for your time and attention. If you have any questions, Kathy and I are here to answer them.
Thank you so much, Claire and Kathy. Before I open up the questions to the board, and I think we have a couple, can you tell me how this would align with the Dream for All program that we just heard about?
Kathy, would you like me to take that, or would you like to go ahead? I'll go ahead if you'd like. So Chair Sotelo, nothing is formalized, but we do anticipate, as we did with the mortgage relief program, that all housing counselors in the network would be trained on the features and availability of the Dream for All loan product or products. And so when, for example, an individual or a family comes to a housing counselor for pre-purchase home counseling, they would be made aware of the existence of the Dream for All loan product. That, of course, is not formalized, it's not launched, but it is a concept that we have been discussing as we see a great possibility for those housing counselors to be yet another voice and outreach capability for Dream for All.
Okay. And then the program that we're asking to adopt basically would sunset next year, midterm next year.
As of now, Chair Sotelo, it is set to sunset in the summer of 2023. But again, I would say that that would be subject to change based on need, availability, of course, of the funding and the board's support of such action.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to board members right now to ask any questions or
Chair
to.
Sotelo, Maria Cabildo, I'd like to ask questions.
Oh, sure. Okay. And then anybody else, I think I could see everybody. Just raise your hand slightly. We have Dr. Bassiani after Ms. Maria Cabildo. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Claire, for that presentation. I'd like to see, could you share the data slide on the populations that have been reached through the program to date? And I'd like to see that slide because I'd like to know, as you thought about expanding, or I forgot the exact language that you used, kind of like replenishing the funding for Home Free. Was Home Free reaching the populations that have been underserved to date? I see that the Latino community has been served at 26% when they're 40% of the state population. And if, I guess I want to make sure that if we're replenishing resources, that the agencies whose resources are being replenished are reaching the populations that we haven't reached yet. And we know from data that there are some members of our community that have subprime loans are steered into like mortgage products that could be seen as predatory at a higher proportion than others. So they have disparate outcomes. So I just want to see, how did we look at the data in determining whether or not this was the agency that needed additional resources to reach the communities that we haven't been reaching to date?
So even at the beginning of the program, when we selected the intermediaries, it was definitely a priority that these three intermediaries prioritized the underserved communities. So they, in fact, do reach many of the underserved communities. So that was definitely something that we did look at. And then the outreach that we do here from CalHFA, as I mentioned, we do kind of adjust that depending on the numbers. And so where you're mentioning the 26%, we have noticed that, and we are going to be adjusting our outreach for that. Claire, do you have anything to add to that? So, okay.
No, thank you, Kathy. Well, we may have more to add if Ms. Cabildo has additional questions or needs more clarification.
I guess I just want to understand, when we are replenishing resources for Home Free, are they doubling down and outreaching to the communities that haven't been as effectively reached to date through the marketing efforts? Is that part of the re-upping of the resources? Because if they're hitting it out of the ballpark and reaching communities that are right now been served at a higher proportion, that isn't helping us expand our reach to the communities that haven't been served yet.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. And Kathy, just to elaborate on that, I think if you tie it to, I mean, do you have goals or targets that you measure the success of this program against?
When the intermediaries originally proposed their services, they definitely had goals, and we do look at those throughout the reporting of the program. We haven't seen where anyone was really not making their marks. So
Thank you.
One further comment. I'm sorry, Director Johnson Hall. I did not mean to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
I wasn't recognized. Go ahead.
The one statistic that I might call to your attention, Director Sotelo and Director Cabildo, in terms of that very bottom line there, and this is not my area of expertise. Kathy is our Director of Marketing and Communication, so she may be able to speak to this more succinctly than I can. But if you look at that other multiple race portion there, I don't know exactly how people are identifying themselves. And in that multiple race category at the bottom, I don't really know. Sorry, go ahead, Director Velasquez or Director Sotelo, I'll return back to you.
Well, yeah, I guess I wouldn't use that as a metrics because that doesn't total 100%. So it's over. When you look at the column on the left, I think I'm not sure we're you know how that's being counted. But Director Cabildo, I know I don't know if your question was answered.
I mean, I appreciate the additional information. I guess I would just say in the future, as we look at other opportunities, I'd really like us to think about how we reach communities that have a lot of distrust of government, that have been, I know that when I was working in the community during the foreclosure crisis, when people were in trouble, they were inundated with predators and they couldn't distinguish between who was really offering help and who was another predator. And I think just understanding that in certain communities, there's a real distrust of government for various reasons. And how do we work with the intermediaries that we're contracting with to reach them? And I guess right now, it's not clear that that's, I guess to me right now, I just don't have clarity on it. I think I'd welcome a conversation to learn more from staff at another time. I think just in the future, I think it's just important to really think if we're resourcing an intermediary that's done a great job, but we're still not reaching a community, how do we look at that work and create targets within a contract to make sure that a community does get reached?
Ms. Sotelo, may I make one more comment that I think might speak to a portion of what Ms. Cabildo is addressing?
Sure.
So to be certain, Director Cabildo, we have utilized an enormous amount of time and effort and thought into making sure that socially disadvantaged people are well aware that the complimentary HUD certified counseling services, they're not a scam, because we know that many people, especially people whose first language may not be English or who may have that distrust of government, may not be willing to go to a housing counseling agency and say, these are my circumstances. So the outreach has been targeted and very specific from both CalHFA and from the intermediaries. By way of example, we're aware that one of the intermediaries under the umbrella of Home for USA goes to faith community gatherings and is in the parking lot or the lobby of the building and offers their services to folks as they exit those faith community gatherings. So we think that the intermediaries and the housing counseling agencies are using a wide variety of modalities to make sure that folks are aware that if they would like a complimentary service from a qualified individual who has been recognized by HUD as such, that is available. I hope that offers you a little bit more information.
Thank you, Claire.
And Madam,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I yield to Dr. Bassiani and Dr. Velasquez, and then I would like to follow up with comments.
Yes, go ahead. Dr. Biasiani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A simple question, changing the subject a little bit. Going back to what I think is the ask of the board members of the presentation, which is to replenish to the tune of $18 million the HUD Certified Counseling Service Program. I made the assumption as I heard the presentation that the $18 million were going to come out of the governor's $300 million package. And then I realized, well, maybe I should not make that assumption. So the question to the presenters, am I correct? Or if it's not coming, then where will it come from?
Dr. Bassiani, this funding is exactly as you first stated. This is from the NMS $300 million of funding being administered by CalHFA on behalf of the state.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Velasquez.
Thank you for the upgrade, Chairwoman. I wanted to ask the staff, following up on Member Cabildo's line of questioning. These are intermediaries, right? But I wonder if it would be helpful to see the next group of housing counseling agencies that are serving the community. And I say that because once we see that, then we can, explore, geographic representation and the types of communities that they are serving. Many on this board have a lot of experience working in certain communities, so we can provide the staff perhaps some guidance on communities that perhaps are not as represented as they should. And I wonder if that information can be made available to the board.
So we do have the data that identifies what each of our intermediaries are doing. I can get that. I don't have it here with me right now, but I can get that for the board and show a breakdown of what each intermediary is doing.
Yeah, specifically, I want to make sure I call out specifically the housing counseling agencies that the intermediaries are using to serve this communities. I just want to be concrete on my request.
Okay, so not just the intermediary, but the breakdown by housing counseling agency.
Right, and which counselors are being basically made part of the program through the intermediary contract, right? Because it's those counselors that are the ones that are boots on the ground working with the families, right? So understanding, what the equity lens is for selecting those counselors or counseling services, and reflective of where they are in the, in the spectrum of outreach.
And just to be clear, just so that the board knows, through our intermediaries, we are contracted with, I'm not sure the percentage, but there's only about 97 housing counseling agencies in California that are HUD certified. And we are contracted with more than 75, I believe. So we have, a very large chunk of the housing agencies under contract through these three intermediaries. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that is the information I think Director Velasquez is asking for. And Director Cervantes, I do see your hand. So if you could go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much, Chair Sotelo. So I've got a couple of follow-on questions, and these might be related to something that Dr. Bassiani raised. So $300 million budget, and we're at the ask here is 18 million so that this one entity can continue its work. So I guess the question is, how much money is left then? So, I mean, out of the 300 million, we have allocated how much before we get to the 18? I just want to get a sense of what the numbers are.
So Mr. Cervantes, Chair Sotelo, may I respond?
Yes, please go ahead, Claire.
Thank you. Mr. Cervantes, the initial allocation approved by this board was $50 million for counseling. Kathy and I then returned before the board to ask for an augmentation of funding. And I believe that amount was 23.5 million. So 50 million plus 23.5 million, and we're before you today to request 18 million only to replenish Home Free, which we project would be adequate funding for all 3 intermediaries and all housing counselors through June of next year.
So if I do my math right, then there's like 200 million left over, give or take?
Yes.
And so, which would mean if another one of the intermediaries, you know, exceeds its targets, needs more money in November, we'd have more than enough to cover that. But it's probably a good chance that we may end up at the end of fiscal 23 with a good chunk of money left over for this program. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir, that is possible.
Which means we could either continue it or just, what, turn it back over to the state? Or, I mean, it's a naive question. Like, what do you do with a couple $100 million here? But I'm just kind of curious.
So to be certain, Mr. Cervantes, there is, first of all, the legislation allows for the use of the housing counseling, the funds for housing counseling, and also for other purposes. And we have had internal discussion about the highest and best use of that remaining roughly 200 million. In truth, I'm not prepared to present that to the board today because internally I don't have a consensus about the highest and best use from our team. We will be in conversation with Ms. Johnson Hall over the next couple of months so that we can potentially come back to the board and propose additional uses of that remaining funding. Ms. Johnson Hall, is that acceptable to you?
That's correct, and I want to pick it up from there. And thank you, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, if I could be recognized. We do have, as Claire has alluded to, we do have an opportunity because we take a look at this program and revisit it to see how we might better reach some of the populations that Maria has referenced. We want to make sure that we get as many of the folks who fit into this very vulnerable class as we can. And to the extent that we can, we will. Under my purview, and I guess because I'm a banker and I'm cheap, I don't intend to give $1 of it back if I have to. I think there are just way too many people that we haven't reached. And I think that we can look introspectively to do that. And I'm not just going to rely on our own resources. We're going to continue to do what we did when we started this program, which was to reach out to the folks who have boots on the ground to see how we might be able to create a better way or a more efficient way and a more effective way to reach those populations who we may or may not have missed. And I'm going to put an asterisk by that may. I also have a little bit of experience in this area, and I can tell you that it is a slippery slope because HMDA data is voluntary, and there's quite a bit of dependency on those folks giving you that information. So we need to go back and take a look at that data introspectively to make sure we're reaching those folks. And so for Director Cabildo, thank you for bringing that up. This is just a moment, again, where we can go back and take a look and make sure and ensure that we are reaching those folks. But I do want the board to understand that ethnicity, race, these are all things, and especially under the HMDA umbrella, that are highly dependent on the resource or the folks that we are trying to reach to deliver that information to us. That is a component, unfortunately, that is something that we need to make sure that we're sure of. I would also suggest to you that one of the other challenges is that we are using HUD certified counselors. Kathy did mention that. That is a huge component. And there are a limited number of folks who actually have that ability, that have that certification. And so that somewhat restricts us, but I'm not satisfied that that should be a staple that prevents us from continuing to reach those populations. So I am absolutely open to listening to stakeholders, listening to folks like Director Cabildo and others who have experience in this area. And I will commit to you, board members, that we will come back with some ideas at a future meeting to share where we are with this program. Ultimately, no money is going to go back. It's going to go to those people who need it most.
Not sure if we lost our chair. Chair Sotelo, are you on? I don't see her on my screen.
Yeah.
It does.
So we do have her still showing on our panelist. Claire, would you want to step in momentarily? Looks like Ms. Anna Marie Avila Frias, and we'll check, has a question, and then we'll check with Ms. Sotelo to make sure that everything's all right.
I would be happy to do so with Ms. Johnson Hall's agreeance to that. Yes.
Yes, that would be great. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson Hall. Director Avila Farias, would you like to make your comment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I was just going to add that I feel very supportive and excited about the path that staff is, directing the board and advising on the allocation. We've done the 50, the 23, and now the request of the 18. Of course, we can, if we look at the past of where we've been, even just in the last 5 years, I mean, there's been amazing progression from our board direction and the intel from staff of what's happening on the ground. And each time we keep upping the ante on our funding and our policies and how we can better improve. And so there's always space to grow. And I have full confidence in Ms. Hall that I know we won't be returning any money. And so I'm really excited about another allocation. And again, we all work in different spaces, and the game in housing is constantly changing, where, people are unfortunately falling prey to, predatory lending, and, the fraudsters out there are always changing the game. And so we always have to keep funding and investing how we can stay ahead of that curve, because we know the vulnerability that's out there, and especially in vulnerable communities. And obviously fixing those stats that, we are in the business of building income equity wealth for people of color in the state. And so that's really important for everyone. And so I think that's the holistic lens that we're all looking through of how to improve it. But it's not holding back and pausing, thinking we're doing something incorrect. It's really keeping up with really changing times consistently in our communities. So kudos to staff. I always feel that you have a great pulse and you rely on all of us serving in the community to continue those efforts. So I definitely feel there's more dialogue in the space, and really excited because we all come to the table with different expertise from different areas of California. So I'm confident that as we continue these allocations, that we recalibrate also how we're dispersing, and and possibly even looking at how do we increase, doing technical assistance of getting more community members certified to be HUD certified housing counselors out there. So I think a lot of creativity has come. I've seen it in my service here, and it's all a new crew now. I know more talent is coming to it, so we got a strong think tank here. So totally confident in all of us to be able to overcome some of these possible challenges. But I think we should all continue. Let's not, let's go full throttle here and continue with the funding of this money on, getting it out.
Thank you, Ms. Avila Frias. We have Secretary Castro Ramirez But I just want to make sure that, I want to summarize what I've heard so far, that we're looking for alignment of these services in this program to Dream for All. I'm also hearing that there is a desire by some of the board members to have targeting and or matrices that we can tie performance to so that we understand where the connectivity actually is. And then we're looking to get a little bit more information around who these counseling services are actually helping directly. And then also we are looking for information on who the HUD counselors are, right? And what the organizations actually are and how reflective they are of the community that they're serving. So those are the key things that I've heard so far. Let me turn it over to Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I completely agree with some of the statements that have been made and the summary that you've provided. I think this is a great opportunity with the infusion of additional dollars for home ownership to be able to fine tune, right, the expectations that we have, the goals that we have when it comes to delivering these services. So I too look forward to future conversations. These funds or funds that came out of a settlement agreement that were directed to CalHFA. And I really like the suggestion from board member Avila Farias regarding also thinking about, can we use these funds to build further capacity of nonprofit organizations that are on the ground providing services? In the midst of this pandemic, the state relied heavily on nonprofit organizations that were boots on the ground, trusted institutions to connect families to rental relief, to mortgage relief. And so maybe there's an opportunity for us to provide some support to some of those organizations that could become HUD certified counseling agencies. So I really appreciate that level of creativity. And then the other would be the opportunity to also leverage these dollars for housing navigation services. Is it possible for us, as we're building more units, more affordable units, are there a level of resources that CalHFA can deploy to ensure that we're connecting particularly individuals that are exiting the homelessness response system into housing? So I would just ask Executive Director Johnson Hall if you can maybe work with your team on also helping us to think about how can we stretch these dollars, right, in this moment where the state is investing a significant amount of resources for the housing ecosystem. Thank you.
Happy to. Thank you, Secretary Lourdes.
Ms. Sotelo, may I offer some additional information that I think may be of use to the board?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think this might be of greater interest to our newer board members. I do realize that, Kathy and I have been working on this program for about 2 years now. So we are sometimes so entrenched in it that there might be some fundamentals that might be useful for the new board members who have not had the opportunity to hear this, that are kind of second nature for Kathy and I. In the initial allocation, to the 3 intermediaries, there was a funding allocated contractually for administrative oversight. There was the lion's share of the funding, and this was consistent with the board direction, certainly was to go to housing counseling. But there was a segment also that was set aside for capacity building funding. And the parameters, as Secretary Castro Ramirez has alluded to, were meant for a multitude of purposes. One was for the hiring and training of HUD certified counselors. There were some individuals who were acting as counselors but did not have that certification, and but for that certification, this funding could not be used. So expanding staffing, also investments in technology, modernization of the operations. In light of the pandemic, we knew that there were a lot of people who were just isolated, who, especially, for example, elderly folks who may not have been able to leave their homes at all. So what we asked the intermediaries to do, and what we think they have done competently, is to invest in technology, including tablets, software, and computers, to make sure that virtual counseling could happen, one-on-one virtual counseling could happen, so that all individuals, irrespective of where they are in the state, could get that one-on-one session or sessions to assist them with their circumstances. I think that's all I have to offer. Oh, and I'm sorry. There is one other component that I wanted to mention to you. Transportation. Some individuals had a difficulty getting into the office of the counselor for a whole variety of reasons. Some of the counseling is done for folks who are experiencing homelessness. Some of the counseling is done for people who are at risk of homelessness. What we did offer was modestly priced transportation vouchers, so that a person who had a transportation challenge and could not get into the office would have a bus pass or a train fare so that he or she could go in and meet with that counselor. We have attempted to be creative in accessing socially disadvantaged communities, and we are very, very open to hearing the board's additional suggestions on how to best utilize this funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Claire, Kathy, before I go to Director Russell, how much of the $18 million is allocated for those additional administrative technology and transportation items?
This 18 million, Director Sotelo, is strictly for counseling, because that is the exhaustion of funding that Home for USA is experiencing. They still have a budget available to them for the administrative cost and for the community, and for the capacity building. Yes. So this 18 million we're asking you for is strictly for those counseling services.
Okay. Director Russell?
So first, I just want to thank staff for your really thoughtful approach to this over time. I have seen how this program has evolved. I'm new today, but I've been here for 6 years. So I've seen this program evolve, and I just want to commend you for being responsive at every step of the way to this kind of conversation at the board. So you know, kudos to you. And I'll just throw one more thing on the table that I think, as we look at how these resources are used, that oftentimes legal services are all that stand between homelessness and being housed. We are seeing an incredible spike. Legal aid services are just being overwhelmed locally. 800 calls a week where they used to get 40. Just to figure out how people can stay housed. And so if there's a nexus that we can draw, I would hope you would consider that among the uses that you're evaluating. So thank you again. I will be very supportive of this action today.
Ms. Sotelo, may I address Mr. Russell's comment? Because as usual, he hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, no, why don't we, I know we have a public comment on this. If the board will indulge us, we'll go to public comment right now, and then we'll come back and decide what the action will be. So Melissa, I'm going to turn to you to see if you have any public comment cards.
Yes, Chair Sotelo. We'd like to offer public comment on this topic. If you are interested in making a comment, please use the raise your hand function on the software right now. We will monitor and look for those that have raised their hands. We would like to ask you to keep your comments brief and to the point in the interest of time, and to make sure that we're able to get as many folks that are interested in making comment to make comment. We'll allow up to 2 minutes per person. And I don't see any hands raised at this moment. I shall ask one more time, if you are interested in making public comment on this particular topic. There will be opportunities for other topics later in the meeting. Raise your hand now.
Okay. It sounds like.
Yep, I don't see any interest at this point, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Sotelo.
Great, thank you, Melissa. So what I'm hearing from the board is general support of the program itself, and certainly all the creativity and what the staff has done. But I'm also hearing that we need some additional information around measurable outcomes and outreach efforts, and taking a look at the program from an equity lens in terms of the distribution of resources and the impact of those resources on the communities that are most intended to be served. So if there is a motion that can combine those two things, I'm happy to entertain that, or I can offer up a motion that I think will cover what I hear from the board.
I'll make the motion that you proposed.
Okay. I'm sorry, and I couldn't identify who that was. Was that Director Prince?
It was. And I see Stephen Russell raising his hand. So.
Okay, Director Russell, did you have a?
I would second the motion.
You had a second. Okay, so the motion that we have before us is approval of the increase, but it is subject to a report back to the board around alignment to the new programs that were adopted, measurable outcomes, and a report back on the counseling services, the actual counselors that are involved in the program beyond the intermediaries that we see in our contract. So that report back will be for our next board meeting. So we have a motion.
Oh, Secretary, sorry, Director Sotelo, I have a question because if the funds are urgent, I don't know that I want to tether the reporting and the alignment to the resources. So I'd love to hear from staff to see if there's an impact of holding these resources for 2 months. And if so, I would say, is there a way of separating the two?
Oh, I think what we were saying is we were adopting the program or adopting the increase, but requesting that the report back come back.
I thought I heard subject to, and for me, subject to sounded as though it would hold it. And I guess I wanted to make sure it wouldn't be subject to, it would be kind of additive.
Right,
I think wanted that clarification before I made my vote.
Okay, so I think that what I was proposing was that we adopt the program right now, but if during the report back there are changes or anything in the report back creates modifications, we can take action at that point. It's not all or nothing. So in terms of the motion, it does complicate it a bit. So Director Prince, work with me on this. If we have the motion that basically says the program, the extension of the contract is approved, and that we approve the $18 million today, but are requesting that the staff come back and follow up with the board on all the various items that were requested by the board. So that action is coming back. It's not an item that just gets approved and no report back is given.
Right. Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the $18 million with a requirement to report back to the board on the open items that were identified in today's meeting. So it's not subject to, it's just requiring that the team come back and report back to the board. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second by Mr. Russell. If there's no further discussion to that, and I'm seeing none, let's go ahead and take a roll call. Melissa?
Okay, Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Mr. Cervantes?
Yes.
Dr. Imbasciani?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Velasquez?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Chair Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Resolution 22-16 with the amendments has been approved.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So just again, to reiterate to the team, congratulations on the amendment, but please perhaps listen to the tape and playback of this meeting so that you can see exactly what the report back should be for our next meeting. That way it's clear. So wonderful. So our next item is we have comments from Mr. Irwin Tam, the Single Family MBS Bond Issuance Authorization Program. And it's Mr. Tam. I don't see you, but I I suspect that you're there. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Sotelo and members of the board. I'm Irwin Tam, Director of Financing, and I'm here today to present to you agenda item number 6, Resolution 22-20. Earlier this year, the Board of Directors approved the single-family bond resolution. That resolution, the resolution that you are being asked to consider today is amendment to that resolution to allow for the use of swaps or hedges to hedge interest rate risk for MBS pass-through bonds. I have a brief presentation that will discuss the rationale for this proposed amendment. CalHFA has used the TBA market executions almost exclusively to finance its single-family mortgage volume since 2013. Since the financing team began drafting the resolutions at the start of this calendar year, the market has been negatively affected by rising interest rates and the pullback of support by the Federal Open Market Committee. And the financing team anticipated some of this market movement and asked the Board of Directors to approve the issuance of up to $1 billion in taxable pass-through bonds in April. If you could turn to the next page. Since then, we have continued to consider additional ideas that will finance the agency's single-family production with the following factors. First, will not use volume cap. Second, is easy to execute. And third, is scalable in the current market. With the TBA market, the economics of the financing are generally known at the trade date, a period approximately 60 days prior to settlement. The same is not true in using the pass-through bond financing. There's a gap between the reservations of the loans and delivery of the MBS, the bonds. During this period of time, CalHFA would take interest rate risk, or the risk that rates rise between these 2 points in time, negatively affecting the economics of such a financing. To address this risk and allow the agency to effectively use this alternative financing strategy, we have put forward to your consideration Resolution 22-20 to allow for the use of hedges to hedge this interest rate risk for a pass-through bond structure. On the next page. Before I pause for questions, I wanted to point out the relationship between the resolution and the board-approved policies from March of this year. The agency's Financial Risk Management Committee meets to recommend and seek specific approval for individual hedges. No hedges will be entered into without the express approval of the Executive Director or Chief Deputy Director. Additionally, last week, the agency's Investment and Debt Management Committee, Chief Deputy Director, Assistant Chief Counsel, and Financing Officer conducted oral interviews to qualify firms to serve the agency as Senior Managing Underwriter in accordance with the board-approved investment and debt management policy. Prior to the issuance of any bonds, this committee will meet to discuss the financial benefit of the pass-through bond structure compared to the TBA market execution. Because of the volatile market, we are still open to considering other methods of financing the agency's single-family production, but we believe that this resolution will provide an alternative to our sole financing strategy. Because of this, we are recommending the board approve this Resolution 22-20. Thank you for your attention, and I will now take any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Tam. Can you please leave the first slide up as directors circulate and ask questions? Yes, great, thank you. Mr. Cervantes, Director Cervantes, followed by Dr. Mbasiani, and I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Chair Sotelo. I just want to note that I did have a conversation with Irwin earlier on this, and you know, I'll be honest, I think this is a really prudent approach to a challenging market situation, because we've seen a dramatic rise in interest rates through the course of this year. This graph is pretty telling, where you could see the increase in the rate of 10-year treasuries and the gold, and the drop in the value of these the to-be-announced securities that we typically would have done. And by, as I understand it, shifting to an approach where we use mortgage-backed securities where we are at risk for a 60-day period. Sorry if I hear you now. But I think that this is an approach which mitigates the risk that we would have in a pretty volatile market and would allow us to sort of lock in a rate without the exposure that 60 days from now, whenever we would close, we could be in a position where we'd have to sort of come up with cash or some other sort of settlement to make a transaction work. So I have to say, I think it's a pretty prudent approach. And I would say that I think this is wise and would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cervantes. Dr. Imbasciani?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tom, for that clear presentation. And notwithstanding everything that Director, where are you? Yeah, Cervantes. There you are. What he just said. Every time I listen to something like this, I filter it through my oversight responsibility. So let me see if I can translate that. We are going to give the executive director in a sense, carte blanche ability to assess risk. But if you could go to your last slide, please, because I want to reference it. But we're going to filter, or she in this case, is going to filter that through our own internal investment and debt management committee in consultation with an outside, assuredly trusted set of advisors. Is that right? But that's what we're doing. We're giving a sort of carte blanche. Yes, you can take this amount of risk without quantifying it.
Essentially, yes. We do have both committees on the risk management side with respect to any derivatives that we would be entering into, and on the bond side, the investment and debt management committee. For the financial risk committee, we do retain a independent swap advisor on that side, and for the investment and debt management committee, we will be retaining or working with our identified senior managers, our bond underwriting firms, to ensure that, again, that this execution is superior to the TBA market execution. We will not act to enter into hedges and or issuance of bonds unless it results in a known and quantifiable better method of execution than what we're receiving currently in the market.
Thank you for that. And is what you just said, it's brilliant, and I understand it. Is it in writing anywhere?
So we do. So in the policies, we do have. Again, the committee has the authority to recommend to the executive director or her designee, the chief deputy director, for approval of these hedges. And same thing on the debt and investment. So that's for the discrete approval of hedges, and that's what we've done in the past when we. We haven't done any single-family hedging because we haven't, issued any single-family bonds. But for our multifamily commitments, we have sought and received discrete approval for individual projects. So when we make financial commitments to lend in the future for our permanent loans on the multifamily side, we ask and we convene a committee meeting, and we ask for approval for that discrete hedge. And so similarly here, we would seek discrete approval for a hedge on the single family side.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your answer.
And just to correlate that directly to the question, we do have this procedure in writing as part of the motion that we took in March of this year, correct?
Yeah, I did. Yes, I wanted to. Yes, I was trying to tie it back to. We are operating within the parameters as designated by the board in its approval of the financial risk management policy and an investment and debt management policy.
And Mr. Tam, can I ask you for an example of the circumstances that would create the need for this process and decision to be made?
So actually, we are looking for better execution in terms of our production on our single family side. And as such, we would actually need to enter into a hedge because otherwise we are unable to quantify its actual execution because we would tell our master servicer that, hey, we would like to purchase this as an MBS in 60 days time. And if rates rose between now and then, we'd just be, or rates fell, or there's a change in interest rates right between now and the delivery of the bonds, we would just have a question mark as to what the overall economics would be. So we wouldn't actually even be able to entertain this, sort of this idea going forward, because we're unable to, again, quantify the benefit, and we would only execute a bond financing if we could actually quantify and say that, yes, indeed, this is superior to the current execution. And without the ability to hedge, we would just have a big question mark as to what the actual economics would be.
So, and just to clarify that, Mr. Tam, this would mean that we are de-risking the process and the evaluation.
In the sense that we're hedging the interest rate risk, yes, but I will, tell you that, we have gone through, there are additional risks with hedges. There are counterparty risks associated with the hedge, but I think we are trying to address the very narrow interest rate movement in time from the reservation of the loans and then the delivery of the bonds, right? These are not going to be long-standing payments. We're not going to be, this is a very discrete hedge between point A and point B, so we can help, mitigate that risk. Otherwise, we would have no ability to, again, quantify or evaluate this alternative structure.
So you're not hedging for a 6-month period. It's really within a 30 or 60-day period.
We think it's going to be about 60 days. That's plus or minus. It's about 60-day period, 2 months in time.
Okay.
Yeah, these are, I think that the agency has had experience with very long dated interest rate swaps, hedging variable rate bonds. That is not this, right?
Okay,
this is point A to point B, right? Because if interest rates move against the agency in those 60 days, I would just, what would we do? We would just be underwater, and I would have to issue bonds for an underwater financing, which doesn't make any sense, right? And so what we're trying to do is mitigate the risk around what the financial outcome would be if we choose to go down this path.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tam. That was a very good dialogue and example. Directors, are there any other questions that you have relative to this item?
Chair Sotelo.
Yes. So I see Mr. Starr or Director Starr.
Director White, were you waiting to speak as well?
Oh.
Yeah, just one quick thing.
Yes,
thank you, Director Starr. Thanks, Mr. Tam, for the great presentation. It's very clear. It's a tutorial. This action that the agency is taking is pretty typical in the financial market. So I know you all need that flexibility. I would ask if we could get, the board could get, I don't know, a quarterly update when it happens so that we could see this in action. For those of us who may not understand exactly what's going on with all of this capital markets jargon, I'd like to just see kind of, maybe it's quarterly, an update on when you actually make these transactions.
Right now, right now, both of the board approved policies have a semi-annual reporting function. So we report to the closest board meeting after February and August one. If you would like to see it quarterly, I can ask that the policy be revised to include a quarterly report with the same information. But again, currently, both policies, so we report on the outstanding par amount of the agency's outstanding indebtedness, as well as the current interest rate swap portfolio, including notional amount. I believe we also report on the current, again, mark-to-markets on our swaps, and that is on a semi-annual basis. But if the board would like to see,
I'm perfectly okay with semi-annual. I didn't realize there was a time on it.
Yes. Perfect. So I believe if the board does not meet in August because of our August 1 sort of cutoff, we will be reporting to a board with an informational item at its September meeting with the interest rate swaps, the agency's currently outstanding portfolio, and outstanding bond balance as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Starr?
Thanks so much. From the treasurer's perspective and from the perspective of the treasurer's office, it's not so much the what or the why with a policy like this, but the how that concerns the treasurer. And I just want to commend Mr. Tam for taking the time to clarify those types of controls and the parameters that he's discussed today in his presentation, and also in discussions with our office leading up to today's board meeting. We're satisfied with the controls in the policy as set forth, and I'm happy to vote in favor of this resolution.
Wonderful. Seeing that there's no other hands raised from directors, I will take Director Starr's comment as a motion, if you don't mind, a motion to approve. And a second from Director Cervantes. So motion 2220 is before us with a motion from Director Starr and a second from Director Cervantes. Melissa, can you please do the roll call?
Yes, Ms. Avila Farias,
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo,
Yes.
Mr. Cervantes,
Yes.
Dr. Imbasciani,
Yes.
Mr. Velazquez,
Yes.
Mr. Starr,
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Yes.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Chair Sotelo,
Yes.
Mr. White.
Yes.
Resolution
22-19 is approved.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Town. So with
22-20,
I
right?
think resolution
22-20.
Yes.
My correction, resolution 22-20 approved.
Wonderful. So with that, board members, that concludes the action items. And what we have next is our new mode of dialogue in a way to bring us all together and look at the great work that that the state agencies are doing. We have our CalVet presentation available, as you can see on the screen. So with that, I'll turn it over.
I guess that means to me, huh? Hey, thank you, Chair and Executive Director. This is a wonderful opportunity. And all the board members, I'm hoping I'm going to, in the next few minutes, entertain you with some history and it was something about an agency that you don't know very much about, but which in many senses is California's very first housing agency as a state. It's one way to look at CalVet. So I've got some slides and I'm going to ask someone on the staff to help me in advance. So let's start. Yeah, my staff did this because they thought the mission of this presentation was to get you to know board members and not just the program. But it's actually telling because I am an ex officio member of this board by virtue of being the secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs for California. And to have my job, you must, by military and veteran code, be a veteran. And I am a 27-year veteran of the United States Army Medical Corps, 26 years served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with 4 deployments to combat zones, and a lot of 10 years of service as the state surgeon for the California Army National Guard. And in the early days after 9/11, I single-handedly did the physical exams on every California soldier that went off to war and when they came back. And that picture, which doesn't tell the whole story of me in Kuwait waiting to be transported to Iraq, what it doesn't, I should show you the thermometer. It was 136 degrees outside with no air conditioning. So those stains on the shirt is body salt. And I'm standing in the other photo outside our very beautiful Veterans Home of California on the West LA Federal Veterans Administration property, where we have almost 400 veterans there, some of whom are older than 100 years old. They come from World War II. Now, I've been a urologic surgeon trained at Yale and at the VA hospital in West Haven, Connecticut. I say that the Yale made me a good surgeon and the Army made me a great war surgeon. And I spent 30 years practicing. This is my 31st year as a genitourinary surgeon. And I still devote 1 or 2 days a month to the practice. Next slide. I'm very active with all the veterans groups. These are the leaders of some of the 50 or so veteran service organizations, VFW, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, Vietnam Veterans, Iraqi War Veterans groups that represent all the veterans in the state. And one of my nicest slides is the one to the right there. I am in Santa Clarita in Antelope Valley at one of the 5 or 6 events we've attended where CalVet working with Habitat for Humanity, in this case, using some of the monies from Prop 41's VHHP, the Veterans Housing and Homelessness Prevention Program, where we actually build veteran communities of 40, 50, 60 buildings. They're duplexes. In many of them, they were partially built with sweat equity, meaning the veteran, to the extent that he or she is able, because we have some severely disabled people, that they actually help create.
What's up, babe? I'm in my board meeting.
Oh, no, I was just telling you I'm done with that vote finally.
Okay.
Go back to my office, like I said.
I'm just waiting.
Anna Marie, please mute your phone.
So this is what we call a key ceremony, where when the buildings are created and ready to be moved into, we actually have a ceremony. It's quite heartrending to see the appreciation that these veterans, some of whom have children, many of them do actually, move into their home, they get their key, and a little bit more on this program. And a lot of community support goes into this. For example, in this group of in Santa Clarita of 72 units, a lot of volunteers from the Home Depot organization come to help on weekends to build, pour concrete and paint. And the Walt Disney Corporation, since there are so many children in this particular development, with a grammar school across the street, they built a playground at no cost to the citizens of the state. So let's go on. So the mission of this agency that I have the honor to lead is to serve and honor all California veterans by connecting them and their families. And these are the key words: with their earned benefits. We don't give anything to veterans for their military service. They earned it. And we do that mostly through education, through advocacy, and the providing of direct services. Let's go on to the vision. CalVet provides innovative leadership in veteran advocacy and veteran services in California. And I can testify that we've been awarded at least 5 times in the last 7 years by the National VA in Washington, awards for best in the nation, innovation, first in the nation programs that we're setting the national standard on how to connect veterans and their families with all of these benefits that they earned through their military service. So something about my agency. Let's go on. The genesis of the California Department of Veterans Affairs, you'll see that serving the housing needs of veterans is foundational to the existence of my agency. It goes back to the establishment in 1884 of the first veterans home in California. It's now the oldest in the nation. There was one in the state of Maine established after the Civil War, but it closed before 1900. So we still are the oldest extant veterans home. It's the largest home geographically and the largest veterans home certainly, but the largest nursing home of any kind in the entire United States by a factor of 3. And that's been going on for about 140 years. Our home loan program, one of the oldest programs of any kind in California, just celebrated its 101st anniversary, and a little bit more on that in a little bit. And then finally, the California Department of Veterans Affairs was established in 1947, paralleling what was going on in Washington, D.C. Around the time of Jimmy Carter's presidency, it was elevated in Washington to cabinet level, and all of the states followed suit, which is how this Department of Veterans Affairs, why we are at a cabinet level department at agency level, if you will. Next slide. we've got three main program areas. I've got veteran services, including outreach to women veterans who are our fastest growing demographic with 160,000 women veterans. But you know, if you look at the picture of people in active duty, you're going to see it's almost a 50-50 ratio in all services, including the Marines, God bless them. So that number is going to grow and grow. We have outreach to all the demographics that compose our California veteran population, any racial demographic that you can imagine, and that includes my specific outreach to the 118 federally recognized Native American communities and to the LGBTQ community that, at least under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell years, suffered in ways that are unique to their population. We run the Veterans Homes of California. It's 8 long-term care facilities, a little bit more on that lately. And finally, our home loan program, which offers home ownership benefit to qualified veterans. So who are these veterans that I'm talking about? Who am I serving? When I started this job 7 years ago, there were almost 2 million veterans in California. And because World War II veterans are now approaching 100 years of age, there are precious few of them left, not very many of our Korean War veterans left. And so our largest cohort until last year were veterans of the Vietnam conflict, who are dying nationally at the rate of 650 a day. So last year, the largest veteran cohort in California are veterans of what I call present conflict. That includes my first war, Desert Storm in 1991, and then of course, Afghanistan and Iraq, Djibouti, Kuwait, and all of the other countries where we put soldiers, sailors, and Marines because of what happened on 9/11. The demographics are 2/3 of them are older than 55. Almost 9% of them live below the poverty level. Almost 1/2 of them identify as a member of an ethnic minority. And as I said, 10% of them are female. We started 7 years ago at almost 2 million. Today, there are a little bit under 1.6 million. And unless we go to war in the next 10 years with a near peer, which is to say a major Asian or European war, which would increase the number of veterans, in 10 years, we will have just under 1 million veterans in California. But paradoxically, their needs have increased, not decreased. And I'll have something to say about that in a second. These veterans that I serve, they seek services and benefits at every single inflection point in their life. At the point where they take off their uniform at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska or Okinawa, and they come back to California, 26,000 every single year. So it's their becoming a veteran. That's the first point. And then when they want to grow a family or educate themselves or to seek out mental health services, to get to have a place to live, maybe to buy a home, to be educated, and including their final benefit is actually refers to the veteran cemeteries, the sort of final resting place that I am responsible for. Next slide, thank you. It should say, I'm sorry, go back one. Yeah, back one. Yes. Specifically on veterans and housing, you should know, especially the members of this board, that the majority of the veteran households that I am cognizant of are considered, and I use 2017 PUMS data, that 30% of them are considered economically burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% on housing, or are severely burdened, where they spend more than 50%. We know that more than 11,000 veterans are experiencing homelessness in California. That number is 2 years old because the pandemic prevented us going out to do the point in time count. But I did go out in February, and I was assigned, along with the Federal Veterans Affairs Secretary McDonough and Mayor Garcetti, the three of us and a team of 10 other people, we were assigned the 22 blocks of Skid Row in LA on a Thursday night between 10:30 and midnight. Quite an experience. So we're hoping when those new point in time comes out, the numbers will be updated. But I've got to tell you, we've got somewhere between 9 and 10% of all the veterans in the entire United States, and unfairly are home to 25% of the entire nation's homeless population and 52% of the nation's unsheltered veterans. I'm a former Vermonter. There are no homeless veterans in North Dakota and Vermont and Northern Maine. And some states like Connecticut with 300 homeless veterans and Delaware with 400, they solved their veteran homeless. I wish I had their problems. Right. So that's what we're working with. Next slide. Thank you. The first of the three services, Veteran Services Division, multiple programs, including how they can transition from military, 26,000 every year, come back to California to learn about all of their benefits. I have a program at every in person and accessible by modules online on all 27 active duty Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard bases in the country. I am the state approving agency for today. 76,000 Californians, veterans, are now in school using their GI and post 9/11 GI benefits, but I approve the school, whether it's Stanford or UCLA, all the way down to a cordon bleu school or an aircraft, a jet airplane repair shop outside of LAX. I got 1,300 institutions. State of Arizona has 112. Through our district offices in San Diego, Oakland, and Los Angeles, we have people that connect veterans who want to file a claim for their disabilities and to set up healthcare in the VA hospitals or to arrange for VA compensation. We bring in over $1 billion in federal aid, federal dollars that are spent by these veterans directly, immediately, and in their communities. And finally, as I mentioned, I run the veteran cemeteries and monuments. Next slide. VHHP was passed by the voters in 2015 and became the Veterans Housing and Homelessness Prevention Program. It gave me $600 million in bond authority that was secured to create this program. It's administered conjointly with friends at HCG and y'all, CalHFA. The program components include a competitive grant process. We're in our 7th year. Approximately $70 million goes to shovel-ready programs in all 58 counties of the state. But there's a key. The contractor has to, a part of the grant application, has to demonstrate to me how he's going to supply the wraparound supportive services. Now, often contractors, quite often, in fact, most of the time, have no idea what I'm talking about and don't know where what a supportive service is and where to find it. But that's where we come in. We know the entire lay of the land, the collaborative and continuums of care from Del Norte down to Imperial. So we connect those contractors, whether they want to renovate in North Hollywood, near where I live, a motel going up of 6 units, or at Mather Air Force Base here in Sacramento, we're building 78 units. The key is to keeping veterans off the street is the supply of these supportive services, which is what made them homeless in the first place. You all know what that means. Mental health, drug and alcohol addiction problems, job training, financial literacy sometimes, food insecurity, all of these things that we work pairing up contractors with the nonprofit community and county level support services to make sure those veterans have what they need. We award the funding for the rehabilitation or the construction of, and I know I'm speaking your language now, transitional, permanent, supportive, or affordable housing for veterans and their families. And of course, supportive services plan is required in the application process. Next. The emphasis is on veterans experiencing homelessness. 50% of the funding serves extremely low income, and 60% of that housing is permanent supportive. For every $1 of VHHP money that we grant out, the awarded project usually leverages on average about $9 in other sources of funding. We've given to date, I'm very proud of these numbers, 478 of the $600 million has been awarded. We have to date built 3,058 of these units all over the state. When I'm done and the 600 million is spent, we'll have built over 5,500 of these units, as I say, in many of the counties. Next slide. The governor was so impressed with the program. He's allowed us and given us some money to start this veteran support to self-reliance pilot. Its purpose is to provide enhanced supportive services to high acuity senior veterans in permanent supportive housing. The pilot will hope to demonstrate that aging veterans who experience chronic homelessness can age in place successfully when permanent supportive housing and supportive services are available to them. We've got $20 million total available in grant awards this year, and the RFA is scheduled for release next month. Finally, our women veterans, next slide. I've got deputy secretaries reaching out specifically to women veterans and to minority and underrepresentatives. I mentioned many LGBTQ veterans in California were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Even if they got an administrative and not a dishonorable discharge, that effectively cut them off from all their federal VA benefits. They can't go to a VA. They can't access a VA home loan guarantee. It's just terrible. But thanks to Swords to Plowshares and many, many other nonprofits, especially legal firms that do pro bono work, the Los Angeles County Bar Association subcommittee on veterans. There's similar organizations in Orange County. They work to correct what we in the military call bad paper, what these veterans were discharged. They're dishonorable or administrative discharges. So by correcting that, acting as their appeal agent in front of federal agencies, we can get them back into under the umbrella to access those benefits. So we do that through all of the examples that I've listed here. And I'll just go on now to the second of our 3 programs, the Veterans Homes of California. There are 8 of them. They offer, you can see where they are, but I'll say something about each of them. We offer domiciliary level of care. That's independent living. That just means room and board, if you want to translate that into English. These are veterans who need a place to stay. If they have higher levels of need, and these are all based on how many activities of daily living you're able to accomplish on your own. If those of you don't have contact or familiarity with nursing homes, activities of daily living are all the things you do for yourself. Get yourself out of bed, walk, feed, toilet yourself. And when it comes to medication, are you able cognitively to understand your medications? And then are you physically able? There are many people who suffer neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, whose tremor prevents them from taking pills, or who may have spastic contracted conditions due to multiple sclerosis, where they're unable to physically administer. So that determines whether they then graduate up to assisted living, which most of us would call basic nursing care, intermediate care, skilled nursing, mostly bedbound patients or veterans, and a branch of skilled nursing called memory care, which we offer in many of our homes. The Yountville home was opened, as I mentioned, in 1884. Thanks to the citizens of San Francisco got a little bit fed up in the 1880s with all of these homeless veterans from not just the Civil War, but from the Mexican-American War. Think the Alamo. They were on street corners with their cap out, asking for alms. And actually, that's the genesis of the word handicap. And this is the time, Abraham Lincoln made the pledge that we would take care of those who have borne the battle and for their widows and orphans. And the veterans were very angry in San Francisco that their needs were not being addressed, and Abraham Lincoln's promise to them was not being kept. Well, at the time, veterans' packages of all their information were all these loose pieces of paper that were bound together. Each veteran had his own packet bound in red ribbon. And so the expression to cut the red tape comes from these veterans demanding that San Francisco and federal entities work on getting them the benefits that Abe Lincoln promised them. So the citizens of San Francisco bought some acreage in Yountville, which at that point was a farm country in Napa County, and that was the beginning. Barstow opened in 1996, capacity 180. By the way, Yountville has a capacity of 900. Chula Vista opened in 2000, capacity 300. West LA, Ventura, and Lancaster opened, all of them in 2000. Lancaster and Ventura only have assisted living, and when patients or veterans age in place and need skilled nursing, they transfer to the federal, to my home on the federal campus in West LA. Fresno opened in 213, capacity of 300, and Redding and Shasta County also 2013 with a capacity of 150. I've got I think I could take in about 3,000 veterans, but COVID has really damped our ability to take patients in, and we're working on that now. The admissions criteria, because you come into contact with many different members of your community, a good number of them are going to be veterans. So you should be aware of some of these criteria. We take in aged, disabled, or homeless veterans, and not just chronically homeless, but sometimes acute. Within a day of a fire, an earthquake, or even a tsunami up there in Crescent City, I will have a team of veterans in the area when thousands of homes, hundreds of homes have been burned, to find out who's lost their home and are they a veteran, have they served? And we have housed veterans in our homes within 5 days. They have to have been on active duty military service, and they have to have had a discharge that is higher than dishonorable. They must be a California resident. I can't accept a Floridian who just wants to be closer to their kids. And that wouldn't be fair to California taxpayers. And they have to be eligible for care by the federal VA, and not every veteran is. Our funding sources on the next slide are 33% of the cost of care comes from the state general fund. Thank you, citizens. The rest comes from member fees based on their income, from the federal per diem and other kinds of programs that I bill the feds for, including Medicare, Medi-Cal, and their own private insurance like Sutter or Kaiser. And now looking at the population of veterans, you'll see there are precious few veterans left from World War II. The demographics tell me that there won't be any in 5 more years, nor in 10 years for Korea. Vietnam war veterans, while not the largest cohort, are the largest population in my homes. Peacetime, you might read Cold War there. And Gulf War is everything from 1991 on. The total census today, because of COVID restrictions, is 1,587. But we are in the process, 5 months into brand new construction, next page, in Yountville in Napa County, of a brand new state-of-the-art 240-bed skilled nursing and memory care facility. It's going to be the gem of that campus. It will replace 3 buildings that we've been struggling with for years. These buildings were old on Pearl Harbor Day, okay? So it's time for an upgrade. We're offering these veterans single room occupancy. The total cost is $320 million. As with all veteran home construction and state cemetery construction, 2/3 of the cost is covered by the federal government and the rest by the state. We will be completed in 2024. That's one ribbon cutting I'd be delighted to invite you all to. And now I'm so inspired when CalHFA staff presents their projects. each meeting. So at the next slide, I tried to imitate you, and there's a sketch of what the Veterans Building will look like on the Veterans Campus. You can see it abuts onto the Shandong Winery. Not a bad place to spend the last couple of decades of your life. By the way, we also take in spouses of veterans. And should the veteran, as is often the case, predecease the spouse, we will keep him or her until their last day. It's very generous of the state of California.
It is, it's wonderful.
The next slide will show you a little different views and what a sample room would look like. And finally, the last program, and one that's near and dear to my heart, I was, I think, was it Secretary Lourdes? Somebody just mentioned that there are now 5,000, or maybe it was Director Johnson Hall, that were 5,000 units already built in that program. You know, I don't want to crow, but I've given mortgages out now to 426,000 California families, but I do have 100 years gain on you on that. We are a direct loan lender. We are not like the federal VA. We don't guarantee the loan. We actually make the loan. And these are to veterans for 100 years that are unable to compete in the commercial mortgage market. These are veterans with very low FICO scores. And but I'm going to tell you, I do this with, and this is externally verified, I do this with one of the lowest foreclosure and delinquency rates of any bank in the United States. And you might ask, how can those two things be possible? You've got a credit risky population that you're lending to, and you do it so successfully. And here's the secret sauce. If any of you on this meeting have, or anyone listening in the public, have a mortgage, you probably have a, what do you call it, a deed of trust from a bank. Technically, the bank owns the house until you pay it off. CalVet is unique. We do not offer a deed of trust. We offer a contract of sale, which means I do not fall under the strictures of Dodd-Frank, which means should one of my mortgagees get into any kind of trouble, lose a job, have trouble with mental health or drug and alcohol problems, or just because of financial illiteracy can't balance their check, whatever the reason, I can legally freeze their mortgage. And because I'm CalVet, I work with them through these supportive services to get them back on their feet, at which point I start the clock again. And that's not fudging, that's completely legal and above board. But, pardon me, it has enabled me to because the voters of California, 27 times, approximately every 4 years, they go to the ballot and they approve my bond measure. The last one 2 years ago for $1 billion in bond authority. That bond measure, by the way, was shared, I think, with other housing programs in the state this time. Because the voters have always looked 27 out of 27 times very favorable on this. Why? Because in 101 years, I have never once touched a single dollar of general fund money. These are self-liquidating loans. When the veterans repay their mortgages, as they do, I repay the bond. I repay the market, the investors. Next slide. I think I'm. Oh, so what kinds of home loans? We used to do farms, but nobody buys farms anymore. Single-family residences, condominiums or planned units, mobile homes, and even now housing and cooperative developments. And we work with tribes. I can't give a loan on sovereign land, but we work with them to give home mortgages to people who want to build adjacent to their tribal lands or rancherias. Next slide. We give construction loans with no required takeouts, rehabilitation loans, home improvement loans for our current CalVet loan holders. And the legislature just gave us the ability to refinance our own loans because when the market had a downturn, we were disadvantaged at our high rate. We suffered the risk of our own mortgagees leaving for more competitive rates elsewhere, and that would have been unhealthy for the program. Here's a nice perk. We self-insure, So for the veterans that lose their homes in these terrible Lake County fires or earthquake and flood, for a deductible of $500, they get their home rebuilt. Yeah, I know I should say it again. The value of self-insurance. I think, is there another slide? 18% of my veterans are earning less than $50,000 a year. 44% earn less than 75, and 2/3 of them are under 100,000 a year. And I think that might be the last slide. This has really been a delight. I don't get to talk about the programs. I don't really like talking about myself in those opening slides. But I hope this gives you an idea. We are a large and sort of a venerable housing agency, if you will. And just to end, because I have the cemeteries, the homes, the homelessness, I go into jails, I have hospice programs. Somebody asked me, what do you do? And I said, well, if you look at it this way, you have to admit, I was raised Catholic. I feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty. I house the homeless. I take care of the sick. I visit the imprisoned. I even bury the dead. I have the only job description in state government that comes right out of the New Testament.
Wow. I love that.
So I said at the last meeting, bring your popcorn, that this was going to be a great presentation, and it was, Dr. Bassiani. I remember fondly when you came to the VHHP grand opening in Fresno. You have been, I think, an inspiration for me personally as I watch you navigate this difficult world of providing all of that assistance you talked about, and you do it with so much grace and so much humor. It's just really wonderful to work with you. And I did not know the full volume of what happens at CalVet. So thank you very much for that presentation. That was amazing. Amazing.
Yes, absolutely. And Dr. Bassiani, I have to apologize because when I was about to introduce you, I went into a coughing fit and I couldn't speak about all the wonderful work that you were doing, but the presentation was so incredibly thorough. And, I don't think that we knew half of the stuff that you talked about.
Well,
So
that's why I think it's important. Thank you, Executive Director and Chair, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to do that, because I'm speaking to opinion leaders and leaders in the housing industry. I think it's really important that now you may have a little bit of a bigger idea. And I will tell you one little footnote, though. If anybody told me 7 years ago that so much of my time and energy would be spent on the politics surrounding veteran cemeteries, I would have laughed.
Well, it's housing at a different level, right?
Oh, 6 feet. Yes, right.
So Dr. Bassiani, I don't know if you would mind, but we would love to get a copy of your presentation. I think circulated to the board and make that available to our teams and
yes. I have annotated notes. I'm going to ask my comms team if there's any way to include the notes with the slides.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed doing this.
Yes, I look forward to that ribbon cutting.
And excuse me, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would just like to just also thank the board for this idea. I think it's so enlightening. It is a great idea, and it's very thoughtful. We talked earlier this morning about relationship building, and this is how you do it. So thank you for your collaboration, Dr. Bassiani. He forgot to mention that he also sings. He's a great chef. He does it all. And for the next one, Dr. White has graciously agreed to provide us to be the next up, and he will be talking about increasing institutional capital into mixed income housing, which I think will be really quite interesting. So thank you, Dr. White, and thank you, Dr. Bassiani. Whoever's the next doctor, you're next.
So, yeah, I think we definitely want to, rotate to understand what other departments within the state of California do, and how we can interface as CalHFA with those departments. I think that was really, the intent that I laid out as we were, as I proposed the idea, and I think this is just a great opportunity to hear from everybody directly. So thank you very much, everyone. I know that we are losing a couple of people. So these two next items are not action items. They're informative and report back. I wanted to take a poll of the board. We do have these two items. Item number 8 is a report back on the mortgage relief program. And then item number 9 is the legislative and budget updates. If the team does not mind, what I think I would like to propose is that we table the report on item number 8, and then just go straight to item number 9 so that we can get the latest and the greatest on the legislative and budget updates. And that way we don't lose everybody before that item gets presented. Are board members okay with that? Yes, no?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's go ahead and just table item number 8. And then if there was a presentation with that, if the staff would not mind circulating that to the board so that we have that and that information, and then we can table that for our next meeting. But if we can,
I'm
yes?
sorry. I just want to be clear on what you're proposing. Are you removing the agenda item entirely, or are you having it trail after number 9? I don't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry not to be clear. When I said table, I meant table it to the next meeting.
Okay. We do have a special presenter, I believe, on agenda item number 8 who has flown out from the other side of the country. I doubt that he will be able to return. But I'm assuming that Ms. Franklin could do the presentation herself. I don't know. This was unexpected. I'm sorry, Chair Sotelo. I was not prepared for this.
No. It's just that we are now on our second hour into our second hour of the meeting. So in respect of that third-party visitor, why don't we do this? Why don't we hear item number 9 as an update, and then go ahead and go into item number 8. So not table it. Let's just change the order. So with that, Mr. Who's presenting? Ms. Martin and Mr. Marty?
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Chairwoman, members of the board, Executive Director, CalHFA colleagues, members of the public. Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon now. It's good to see all of you. My name is Francesc Martí, and I am the Director of Policy, Strategy, and Legislative Affairs at CalHFA. So I'm going to be providing you a legislative update, and I'm also going to cover recently enacted budget legislation, which establishes the California Dream for All program. And then my colleague, Alan Martin, Director of Business Development and Stakeholder Relations, will provide you a little bit of a deeper dive into the shared appreciation model that is the basis for this California Dream for All program. So next slide. I'll start with the federal state of play. So as many of you know, there have been some intense negotiations between Majority Leader Schumer and Senator Manchin on salvaging very few select pieces of the Build Back Better Act and moving them through a reconciliation process, particularly some climate pieces. This process has been a lot more closed doors than the kind of open negotiations that happened last fall during Build Back Better. But regardless, the low-income housing tax credit advocacy community, which we're a member of CalHFA, have been holding a sliver of hope to advance some of our tax credit priorities. So it was always a tall order. We were very realistic about this, but even that came crashing last week when Senator Manchin announced that he would not be supporting some of these Build Back Better elements through reconciliation, right? And so there had also, I should also kind of inform the board that there had also been some efforts to attach LIHTC provisions to a very prominent bill on technology competitiveness that's being considered in Congress on a bipartisan basis called the USICA bill, also known as the semiconductor bill in Washington, D.C. And that effort also failed. So one silver lining is that throughout these advocacy efforts, lowering the 50% test has perhaps been the #1 item being requested by the LIHTC community, together also with this 12.5% increase in the 9% program. And as you all know, lowering the 50% is CalHFA's #1 legislative priority at any level of government. So its current prominence in the federal debate, I think, is testament to all the groundwork we've laid over the years, and I think it does position us very well for upcoming vehicles or upcoming debates. We've come a long way. Like when I used to travel to Washington D.C. a few years ago, I think it was just kind of California and New York asking for this, and now it's really top of mind for the entire LIHTC coalition. So with reconciliation, seeming extremely unlikely, the best possible upcoming vehicle for us to move lowering the 50% test might be an end of the year, what they call a cleanup bill during the lame duck session. There are a number of very important tax extenders that Congress needs to pass beyond the end of the year, including interest, and research and development expensing and depreciation provisions. And, since there are already tax provisions, those could be a good vehicle to attach some of the LIHTC items. And so while we wait for that vehicle, one of the best things we can do is to continue to promote the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Improvement Act, which is that Canwell and Del Bene standalone bill that includes the 50% test and is the gold standard for affordable housing in Congress. So currently 40% of the House is signed on as co-sponsors, including 60% of California's delegation. And the 50% test is actually getting a lot of visibility as well in congressional oversight hearings, such as one that happened just yesterday in the Senate Finance Committee. In this slide, I'm also including a few bills that we're keeping an eye on. I'm not going to go over in the interest of time. I know we're already kind of rushed, but there is a bill to redesignate volume cap carry forward, which would be great for California. Chairwoman Maxine Waters has a first generation homebuyer assistance program that just moved out of committee very recently. And the Neighborhood Homes Act, which is kind of like a home ownership version of LIHTC, is also very much part of the conversation. These standalone bills have a very low probability of passing by themselves, but they are very important kind of markers in the federal conversation. And so the federal budget process, the next time has been plodding along as it usually does. And the House passed yesterday its FY23 spending bill. It actually provides a really large increase to HUD, about 17%, I believe. And the Senate is expected to release its draft bills in the next few weeks. However, given the timing that we're looking at, everybody expects that the federal budget will not be enacted before the end of the federal fiscal year at the end of September. And what that means is that, as has been customary in the last few years, they'll need to pass a continuing resolution to keep government open and funded. So I won't go into the items of the federal budget, but there's one item that I would like to highlight. It's small, but it's kind of, I think, significant for us because as part of one of the main programs at HUD is the Home Investment Partnership Program, HOME. But this, in the House spending bill, HOME includes a $50 million set aside nationally. So a very small amount nationally, but for a pilot program for down payment assistance for first generation home buyers that will go to states. So now this is a small amount, but I think it's significant that as part of the House spending bill, there is that kind of down payment assistance component for first generation home buyers, right? It's a little bit like the same concept that Chairwoman Waters was advancing through her standalone legislation. And lastly, I do have to mention that very kind of prominent item federally is that federal bank regulators, and that's the OCC, FDIC, and the Fed, continue to work towards a unified revision of the Community Reinvestment Act rules That would be kind of the first comprehensive revision since 1995. And as you know, CRA is absolutely critical to sustain the tax credit pricing, right? And so therefore, it is crucially important to CalHFA. Right? Our regulators are aiming to finish this this reform by the end of the year, and there is a notice of proposed rulemaking out there with a joint proposal from these regulators out there, and comments are due by August 5th. And there's two industry groups that CalHFA is part of, NCSHA, it's the grouping of state HFAs, and the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition, which is a slightly broader group. And you know, they're both engaged in this debate. We're reviewing draft regulations from both of these groups, and these two groups are going to be speaking on our behalf and are making, you know, very, very comprehensive comments to the CRA proposed rule, with an eye always on proposing changes or tweaks that will sustain LIHTC pricing. So then I'll turn to the next slide. So I'll speak now a little bit about the state legislative session. We're past the equator of the state legislative session here in Sacramento. And as you can see, they only have 1 month left after they come. So they come back from summer recess on August 1st, and they'll just have the month of August to work on the bills that are still live and that are still active, right? So next slide. So the legislative process, you know, as is typical, has already rendered a number of bills inactive for the year, including a number that we were tracking, and they're listed on the lower part of the screen. By the way, this is not comprehensive. There's a more comprehensive report as part of the board package. But there are a number still of very prominent housing bills that, you know, on topics such as building residential and commercial zones. You've probably read a lot about that in the media, minimum parking requirements in housing, the density bonus law, creating a Los Angeles County housing finance entity, also creating a consolidated affordable housing database at HCD, and also a bill calling for state housing entities, including CalHFA, to harmonize their compliance monitoring regimes. So as I said, there's a detailed report on this as part of the board package. And now I'll turn to the state budget in the next slide. Yeah, sorry, next slide. Yeah, I hear we might be having technical difficulties, but in the interest of time, I can continue because you know, you all have access to this presentation and can review it. But as most of you know, and as Secretary Castro Ramirez mentioned, the state budget was enacted and signed by the governor in late June, and in one more year, it included prominent funding for housing. And the number that we have there's a graph, you can't see it right now, but there's a pie chart in the next slide that has about 3.3 billion amongst, you know, amongst TCAC, CalHFA, and their Interagency Council for Homelessness, HCD as well. And that number actually goes up to 11 billion when you count housing and health supports outside of these four entities over a multi-year period. And so let me just highlight two CalHFA items in there, right, which are 50 million to supplement the ADU program that is already up and running, right? We got 100 million in the budget last year, so now that goes up to 150 million. And then there is 500 million for a new California Green for All program, right? And this is an innovative way of providing down payment assistance through a model called shared appreciation. So, and as our executive director alluded to in her remarks, this innovative program is obviously a big deal for CalHFA, and it has the potential to make a difference with tens of thousands of California home buyers, right? This program lives in 2 places in the various budget bills that were passed in the end of June, and you'll have this in the presentation, or the kind of legislative reference numbers in case you want to access them at any point. But the funding was appropriated as part of a budget bill called the Budget Bill Junior, and that's SB 178, and that's where you will see the 500 million, and that's state general fund support. And second, there's the housing trailer bill, that's SB 197. So you'll probably be hearing these bill numbers a lot, right? Because there's going to be a big program in CalHFA in the upcoming years. And SB 197 creates a whole new part of the health and safety code to create the California Dream for All program, right? And I'll just give you a few highlights of what this bill does. So it establishes the program and the fund. It mandates that this program be a shared appreciation model. So it does have to be that. We can't do another type of down payment assistance, right? It does give CalHFA a lot of discretion in designing the exact parameters of how that shared appreciation program is going to look. And it lines out broad program objectives, right? And I'll speak about those in a little bit more detail because I think it's important. And then it tells us you can use the funds for the shared appreciation second loans, which are going to be the down payment assistance, but you can also use these funds for closing cost and interest rate buy downs for the first mortgages for those home buyers that are taking out these shared appreciation loans. So closing cost and interest rate buy downs on the first mortgages that are attached to these shared appreciation loans. And then it also has an annual reporting requirement that we have to annually report to the legislature every January on our progress on this program, right? So while the legislation does give CalHFA a great level of discretion, it does establish some overarching principles for the program. And this provides a crucial reference point for CalHFA as it sets about to design the program, right? And I'm just gonna go over them quickly. My colleague Alan will go into more detail about the model, but one is expanding access to homeownership, right? Second is wealth creation. Program is meant to, okay, so we just got the slide back up. Wealth creation. This program has a social equity mission to reverse, historic systemic discrimination and allow disadvantaged communities to build wealth. So wealth creation is a crucial component of the program. Then another objective laid out in the legislation is to maximize the number of households assisted over time. So there's a mandate there to recycle the funds, to see if we can sell the second mortgages to private investors, etc. There's a lot of discussion about how to do that, but there's a mandate for us to recycle the funds and maximize the amount of people we can help with this state investment of 100 million. There is a long-term aspiration that this program scale up to $1 billion annually. Doesn't say by when, but there is the aspirational language in the bill. It does list as an objective that the program has to be fiscally sustainable for the agency. And not detract from the other affordable housing objectives and mission that we have. And then a very important component in the bill, and it's actually in several places, it's adequate consumer protection, consumer disclosure, and outreach. This is a very, very important component. It was prominent during the discussions in the legislative process, and this is a very kind of new and innovative product. That's why it's exciting. That's why it can be impactful. But precisely because of its newness, because a lot of consumers might not be as familiar with it, CalHFA has a fundamental objective to make sure that we go above and beyond in terms of the disclosure, in terms of making sure they understand, in terms of doing outreach, and protecting customers. Now that I've explained the legislative framework for Dream for All, I'll turn it over to Ellen Martin, Director of Business Development and Stakeholder Relations, to delve a little bit deeper into the shared appreciation model, which, as I said, is the foundation of Dream for All. But before I turn it over to her, I'll pause for a second to see if there's any questions or comments on the legislative component of what I just described?
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Frances. I don't see anybody with their raised hands, and I wanted to be mindful of our guests from out of town. So would it be appropriate at this point, Ms. Johnson Hall, to ask Ellen Martin to provide our deep dive review at our next agenda item? At our next meeting, as opposed to today, so that we can move back to item number 8?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe that Ellen can get through this in about 3 to 5 minutes at the most. And so I'm going to ask her, and I know that there have been a number of folks, because of the huge press release and from the GO's office and so forth, that we think it's important that we do give the public a little download on this, and it'll be really quick.
Okay, and I don't want to shortchange the importance of the presentation. So if there are follow-up items and a deeper dive, we can do that in our next meeting as well.
Yes, thank you, Madam.
Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
All right, well, thank you very much. Courtney and Melissa, do we have the slide deck? I saw it up for a moment, but looks like it. Okay,
I'll have that up for you shortly, Ellen. Just one moment.
No problem. I will get started, and there's just a couple graphs that I'd like to be able to speak to, so hopefully we can get that up. Well, thank you, Francesc, and thank you, Chair Sotelo and members of the board. Again, just for the record, my name is Ellen Martin, and I am the Director of Business Development and Stakeholder Relations. So I'll take just a very little bit of time to offer a brief overview of the Shared Appreciation Loan as a concept, and how we see the program design process unfolding. All right, so it looks like we have it up. If we could go to the next slide, please. So to begin quickly, a shared appreciation loan is a loan that is repaid by the borrower through an established share in the home's value. So if under the Dream for All program, CalHFA provides a shared appreciation loan that amounts to 20% of the home's purchase price, the borrower then repays that 20% plus 20% of any appreciation in the value of the home. Typical features of the shared appreciation loan have many similarities to our existing programs. They're subordinate to the first mortgage. They'll likely be used to provide both down payment assistance and, as Francesc mentioned, to fund closing costs. And the loan becomes due upon the sale, refinance, or transfer of the subject property. There is one big difference, and that is that with the shared appreciation loan, the cost to the borrower is variable. And that is in contrast to our existing My Home programs that charge a simple interest at a fixed rate of 1%. So under the shared appreciation loan structure, the effective interest rate on the loan is actually, really effectively based on the average annual rate of real estate appreciation. So let's go to the next slide. So moving into an illustration of this as a concept, this chart shows the distribution of proceeds from the sale of a home under the shared appreciation model, assuming that home values appreciate at a constant rate of 4% per year. And we'll talk a little bit that is not exactly what we see in the real world. So on this chart, the bars represent the value of a home over time. The gray portion is the balance on the first mortgage, and the blue section represents the homeowner's equity in the home, which increases over time as the homeowner pays down the first mortgage and benefits from the appreciating value of the home. And then finally, we have the orange portion, which represents the Dream for All Shared Appreciation Fund, reflecting that original 20% investment in the home, which grows over time as the home value increases. So in this illustration, we have a homeowner that's purchased a $500,000 home with a $100,000 in a Dream for All Shared Appreciation loan, who could sell that home about 15 years later for approximately $900,000. The Dream for All fund then receives a payoff amount of $180,000, and the homeowner would benefit from the wealth accumulating effects of paying off that first mortgage and from the increased value of the home. So that's fundamentally what shared appreciation is as a concept. As we move into designing the Dream for All program, there are, however, a number of considerations that we do need to keep in mind. And let's go to the next slide, please. So chief among those considerations are real estate dynamics and the cyclical nature of home price appreciation trends, as importantly illustrated by the chart on the left of this slide. So in the prior slide, we showed what shared appreciation looks like, assuming an average annual appreciation rate of 4%, which is illustrated by that blue dashed line on this chart. But the actual year-over-year home price changes that we observed are expressed by that very spiky orange line. So as you can see, while the average annual rate of real estate appreciation does range from 4 to 5% over the long term, the actual rates of change are much more volatile. And it's this volatility that we need to use care to design for, to operationalize a program that meets our goals and objectives with consideration to what happens at various stages of the real estate market cycle. So to put it a little more directly, any borrower that has to make a decision about selling their home at any given time may profit or lose depending on where they hit this cycle. And we need to be very, very clear-eyed about those dynamics as we design this program. So we also have to recognize, as a state agency, we are implementing this program, or we are beginning the implementation of this program at the peak of the real estate market in a rising interest rate environment. And we need to ensure that we recognize the risks that are inherent in that. It's also important to note that shared appreciation has not been done successfully at the scale that we're talking about here. So we don't have a successful precedent at this scale to follow. But we do have a number of lessons learned from other programs, and we will certainly be looking to those as we're implementing Dream for All. So with that backdrop in mind, the key objectives of the California Dream for All program are listed on the right-hand side of the slide. Francesc covered some of them. Fundamentally, the goal of the program is to increase access to home ownership for low and moderate income Californians. Another goal is to provide opportunities for wealth accumulation through home ownership. Next, importantly, is minimizing financial risk to the state, the agency, and the consumer by building in safeguards and features that can help us to blunt those effects of real estate market volatility, and also, very importantly, speaking to the pillar of CalHFA operations as sustainable home ownership, we need to ensure that consumers are financially equipped for the responsibilities of home ownership. Francesc mentioned that a key tenet of the Dream for All model is ensuring that funds are recycled, that monies come back to the fund, and that they do so at a rate that is sufficient to provide similar levels of assistance to future home buyers. We need to make sure that consumers are fully educated regarding what they're signing up for. And finally, we need to design the program such that we can effectively operationalize it over the long term. So just a couple more comments. It's important to acknowledge at the outset of this program design process that there are really any number of contradictions and potential conflicts inherent in the program objectives that we've outlined today. So for example, as we're trying to increase home ownership, but we're also trying to minimize financial risks to the state. So we have to be careful as we look at any provisions that might open up the credit box, because by definition, those loans will be at a higher risk of default. Similarly, we're focused on increasing wealth, but we're also trying to ensure that the funds are recyclable. So there are certain provisions that we might consider as part of the program design process that would create additional equity for a home buyer, but that could result in reduced program revenues, or importantly, it could also limit our ability to sell these loans on the secondary market. So we have to keep that top of mind. So we know that there are really many trade-offs to be made as we're establishing the program parameters, and we're committed to very thoughtfully balancing those competing objectives and making clear choices to design the program. So very quickly, an overview of our program implementation process. We're currently working on program design, which will involve significant feedback from the stakeholder and lending community. We'll then move into a systems and infrastructure building stage, and followed by a lender onboarding and training process. We will marry program implementation with consumer education and disclosures, which will be ongoing as we implement the program. And then we'll be undertaking ongoing monitoring to ensure that the program is accomplishing the key objectives. we are currently assembling a multi-divisional project work plan that will provide a complete inventory of tasks, and we anticipate that as we finish that work, we can provide the board with a more detailed time frame for program implementation. So I just want to comment that we have deployed a very, very talented team of dedicated and expert CalHFA staff to stand this program up. And I personally am extremely excited to work with them on what is sure to be a groundbreaking effort. And I'm excited to partner with the Treasurer's Office and the legislature in those efforts as well. So with that, Francesca and I would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
I just have one quick statement, which is respecting our next person. I would love for this to come back because I have a ton of questions and I don't want to ask them all the time.
Thank you, Preston. I was about to say the same thing. I think that this really does merit a deeper dive by the board and a longer opportunity to have dialogue around the framework of the program as it's being developed. Also, I think it would be important to hear from stakeholders, right, and to engage the public in dialogue. So as you're going out to get feedback from the stakeholder groups, if you can invite board members to those sessions, just so that, you know, we could either participate or hear directly, and or if we have this at our agenda item, we can certainly have stakeholders engaged at the board level and hear directly from them. So let's be thoughtful, Ms. Johnson Hall, about how this gets us cycled back into dialogue with the board.
Happy to. These are my people. I'm there for them. So
yeah, and Francesca and Ellen, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that we have to rush on, but we're going into our third hour, so I want to make sure that I'm mindful of people's time and commitment. So with that, let's hear from Ms. Rebecca Franklin, who is the president of the California Homeowners Relief Corporation, our new nonprofit organization. She's here to introduce the California Mortgage Relief Program and our guest speaker. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As many of you know me, my name is Rebecca Franklin. I'm the Director of Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance for CalHFA. I also get the honor of serving as the president of the CalHFA Homeowner Relief Corporation that we established to administer the American Rescue Plan Act funds we received last year. So I also have the pleasure of presenting this item to the board with one of the senior leaders from the program, Mr. Gio Shannon. He is the reporting director for the program itself. He also serves as the chief data officer of the firm that we have partnered with to administer the funds, OSAS. The OSAS firm, as well as Mr. Shannon, do have a large wealth of knowledge and experience, not only distributing state and federal funds, but also in specifically eligibility-based processes and programs. So if we go to the next slide, Mr. Shannon and I will be doing a couple of things with this item. First, we have a lot of new board members, and so when we kind of established this program last year and developed it, we did make a lot of decisions, kind of like what Ms. Martin did describe the approach to the Dream for All project as well. So we wanted to kind of give the new board members a little bit of a foundation as to why we made certain decisions in this program and kind of what got us to where we are today. Additionally, as I have always said, I wanted to come back to the board and present any large changes to the program itself. And then lastly, Mr. Shannon's going to follow up with kind of that, how are we doing from a data performance in the program, but also giving a little bit more color as to what our expectation was when we created this program and comparing that to the performance. If we go to the next slide. So very much the same approach that CalHFA is going to be taking with Dream for All is when we constructed the mortgage relief program, we started with asking, what did the California homeowners and advocates in the state want for these funds? What did they prioritize? What they thought was important? We did listening sessions, we did surveys, we connected with a bunch of advocacy groups to understand what was the priority for the program. And overarching, people wanted help now. they were sitting in forbearance, they had arrearages on their, bank statements or mortgage statements that are coming in, and they prioritized, they wanted to see the funds being distributed now. When we were building the plan, we also recognized that the mortgage relief program is one of many relief programs that the state and the federal government started and established and deployed due to the pandemic. We're all familiar with the emergency rental assistance, but there's a variety of programs. So we recognized while we were trying to do a data-driven kind of looking at the market needs, looking at what the consumer said they needed, we also realized that we are going to need to do continual assessments with this program to maintain the impact and making sure that we are helping California homeowners in a way that is most impactful to them, looking at kind of what the outcomes of the other relief programs, et cetera. So that continual assessment, that data-driven approach is allowing us to make these proactive adjustments to the program to maintain, that we're helping people how they need it. Actually, we had a check-in with the U.S. Treasury Department earlier this week, and they commended the state of California on our data-driven approach that we've taken the time to establish the metrics, to collect the data, but not only doing that, the analysis we're doing to use to make proactive and kind of making sure our agility and flexibility in the program, maintains that impactfulness. If you go to the next slide. So what is the outcome of that analysis? Well, basically, last month, we did a huge program expansion. So kind of in two areas. One, we did deploy a new offering to California homeowners, and that was through a property tax assistance kind of utility or sub-program. So it is a one-time grant up to $20,000 for people who have property tax arrearages, and that's really driven towards people who maybe they paid off their mortgage, they don't have a mortgage, senior citizens, or people who uncoupled their mortgage payment with their property tax payment and they have fallen behind on one of those. So also we are covering PACE lien arrearages, and that did affect California homeowners, driving up those property tax bills, making it unaffordable in some cases. The second thing is we expanded our eligibility criteria. As I said, when we were developing this program, we submitted a plan in August of last year. We were approved in December of 21. A lot had changed in that period of time, especially around delinquencies in the state of California. The federal government deployed a lot of policy changes. They deployed a COVID-19 specific loan modification offering to people in forbearance with arrearages. And what that impact did was really cut down the number of delinquencies in the state, the number of homeowners who needed that reinstatement. So we looked at that data and we said, we have the opportunity to raise our income limit per the UST guidelines from 100 to 150% of the area median income. So we felt like this was the right time to kind of expand our offerings to more homeowners in the state. Additionally, the state of California does have an eligibility criteria that we want to make sure that homeowners are currently delinquent, that we're not promoting any sort of other behavior with this kind of grant or assistance. So we do have a criteria that says you must be at least 2 payments behind and currently delinquent on your mortgage, 1 payment on your property tax. And that date originally was by program launch, which was December of 21. We've reset it to June of 2022. And that recognizes that the economic impact of the pandemic is currently still going. And people may have accepted a loan mod, have fallen behind because their financial position didn't change, even after that loan mod was accepted. So we did deploy those changes in June of, or the last month, this June of this year. If you go to the next slide, the next thing I wanted to update, especially the new board members, I know, sorry if this is a repeat for some of our more tenured board members, but with the UST guidelines, with the US Treasury, with the HAF plan, with the Housing Assistance Fund establishment, there's very clear to us and through those documents that there was a expectation that we help, we target our outreach and marketing efforts to what they deem socially disadvantaged communities or homes that reside in those socially disadvantaged communities. And so first and foremost, we had to define for the state, what is this home, what's a socially disadvantaged community, so where those homes reside. And so we define that in 2 ways. It's a geographic filter. First, if the home resides in a qualified census tract or QCT. Secondly, we leverage the UCLA Neighborhood Knowledge Center and their study on an owner vulnerability index. And this study was conducted with the mindset of informing COVID-19 relief homeowner packages. So they looked at a variety of variables and they established 5 different kind of rankings on that owner vulnerability concept. And so if the home resides in a zip code that's deemed at highest or high, a 5 or a 4 per that index, that home's also considered residing in a socially disadvantaged community. So a lot of our marketing and outreach is targeted towards those communities through this program. Additionally, the state of California did a reservation of funds outside of the U.S. Treasury guidelines. So we dedicated that we will commit 40% of all funds distributed to this program will be to homes in these socially disadvantaged communities. So that's 40% of that, our commitment to not only just the outreach and marketing, which we're required to, but additionally, we wanted to make sure those funds were going to those communities. If you go to the next slide, it's just an overall kind of review of the marketing and outreach activities. I will highlight our community-based organization network that we have established. A best practice emergency rental assistance also leveraged a similar network. It's not the same network, but it's a similar concept in that we really want to make sure that we are providing culturally competent in-language support to these homeowners, to these communities. And so the CBO programs help us. They're known resources in their neighborhoods. They're trusted. We recognize that when you're facing foreclosure, it's a very, very stressful and personal situation for these homeowners, and they may not want to talk to a complete stranger about that. And they also may want to converse in a language they're most comfortable with, and it may not be English. We translate all of our documents to 6 different languages. We also have additional support through our contact center with other languages. So we're really committed to coming to those homeowners in a way that they're most comfortable with, to engage and help them, guide them through the option of maybe curing their arrearages through a program like this. Lastly, I wanted to go to the next slide, is our press event that we did have the secretary as well as Ms. Johnson Hall and myself. We were able to actually hold the event at one of our community-based organizations, the Korean American Federation in Los Angeles. It was very well received. We got a lot of coverage. Additionally, when our meetings with U.S. Treasury this past week, we were commended on the state of California, how much effort we took to announce and publicize these program expansions, that they were actually wanting to get more details as a best practice for the other HAF-related programs in the other states, and that we had really taken the time and the effort to make sure that we communicated these changes. So now that I've given you kind of an overview of the program and the kind of changes thus far, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Shannon to kind of talk about how we're doing from a data analytics perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin, and thank you everyone for having me. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a market overview of delinquency for owner-occupied units in the state of California. And just as a note, nationally, delinquency is below 3%, and in California below 2%. So that's good news to see those trends going down, but it is a market that we're monitoring for this program. In total, there's 88,000 delinquent homes, and a little over half of those are 60+ days delinquent. As part of the property tax program that we released, we did an in-depth analysis with the county tax collectors. They provided really helpful information for us to get estimates, and we estimate there's about 50,000 households in the state of California that will be eligible for the new property tax program. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. As far as program operations, so we've received 17,500 total applications, of which 13,000 of those have received a determination. In total, we have funded 98 million, almost 99 million, and that number is related to payments that have actually gone out on behalf of individuals. We also have an additional 9 million that's already been approved, which will be paid in the upcoming week. For the determinations, as I mentioned, we've had 13,000 determinations. We have a category for cancellation, and the 2 main reasons for a cancellation is, 1, an applicant does not respond, so they have a 30-day time period if we need additional documentation from them, and the second item is they accept a loan modification and no longer are eligible for the program. On the approval and delinquency side, or excuse me, declination side, the 2 largest reasons for declines in the program is a applicant was not delinquent before program start, which we addressed in the June program change. And the second largest reason for declines was that they were above AMI, which is also addressed in that June change. So we'll be monitoring that as the program moves forward from those changes, and expect that approval rate, which has improved month over month, to continue to improve. Next slide, please. So a few of our goals are around making sure that the program is operating smoothly and efficiently. One of those goals is to help those in need. So we look at the AMI, which is the area median income. The average approval AMI for the program is 59%. So that means they're making 59% of what would be 100% of the area median income. The average assistance is 35%, and our program maximum is $80,000. As Ms. Franklin mentioned, we have a reservation of 40% of funds for socially disadvantaged, and currently so far throughout our program, there's been 58% of approvals are for those in those socially disadvantaged communities. So it's really been a great job of targeting outreach directly to those communities, and we've seen that result in that number there. As far as processing time, we have a goal of 60 days, and currently the median processing time is 44 days for an application. And a quick note on that number, so that number includes items that are outside of our control, for example, awaiting on additional information from an applicant, or awaiting on additional information from the servicer as part of our communication process with them about the loan. If you remove those wait times, the median time of our processing time in the program is only 25 days for an application. And then the final piece is a 7-day approval average. So on average, it takes 7 days from the time someone is approved until they receive the funds. We can go to the next slide. This last slide here is about the new property tax program. So keeping in mind, this program is only 1 month old. We've already received almost 600 applications, and we've approved, and this is a number from Tuesday, and I checked this morning, we're still just barely below 1 million in approvals for our new property tax program. And we expect that to continue to rapidly grow as more people learn about the program and more applications come in.
That concludes our presentation and update. We welcome any questions from the board.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You know, as being a board member, you know, on the other side of on the other side of the nonprofit, it's just fantastic, all the work that we've done as a team, and your, you know, just your knowledge about this and your ability to execute has been so great, and I'm so glad to hear that you know, Washington has seen that and has acknowledged that. So thank you very much for constantly keeping us at the forefront, Rebecca. I really appreciate that. Board members, we have Director Cervantes who has a question, and is there anybody else that has a question? And then Director Gavillo, and then oh, hi. We have Sasha Kurgan here for Secretary Costa Ramirez. So that'll be the order. Director Cervantes.
Thank you, Chair Sotelo. So I have a question on the property tax program. So you get your property tax bill, there is the ad valorem tax, but then there's typically other assessments, special taxes, and so on. So is this program designed for the whole bill or just the property tax part of it?
No, it's for the or what they would consider the arrearage per the tax assessor's office. So it would be the entire arrearage or the bill. So whatever makes up your payment and you didn't pay that, we would be covering those fees.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, does it include the 10% late fee plus the 1.5% per month on top? Like all the fines and penalties on top?
Yeah, we would cover the full amount of the arrearage up to $20,000.
Okay, so you clear it, in other words, up to 20,000.
Yeah.
Got it.
And
Thanks.
for those homeowners, and so we've worked really closely with the counties. Most counties, I don't want to say all counties, will allow us to use that $20,000 as a down payment, and then they'll put that homeowner in a payment plan, and that goes out to 4 years. So we really try to cut the, you know, kind of that arrearage down. We worked with the, as Mr. Shannon said, with the county tax assessor's offices to come up with that 20,000 mark, and they really felt like that was really going to be able to help most homeowners in that arrearage situation.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. You shared that one of the reasons that folks were declined was because they didn't meet the criteria for the delinquency date, but now there's been a change, and I'm curious, were you able to retain the information on folks that were declined for that reason? And is there a reason to, easy way to reach back and ask them? And then the second was whether there's any alignment between in your outreach plan. I noticed that a piece of your outreach is community-based organizations engagement, and I'm wondering if there's any overlap with the HUD counseling agencies that are being funded through the other work.
Yeah, so I'll take the first question first. So for the, I'm sorry, repeat your first question again, sorry.
Related to the reaching out to folks that have been declined because of delinquency date, they didn't meet it.
Yeah, so it was very important to us to be able to be the person to contact, or the entity to contact those homeowners. So we had our press event on Tuesday, the 14th. Monday at 8 a.m. on the 13th, an email was sent out to all of those applicants who were denied for both the income eligibility as well as that delinquency by date. So we have different denial codes that we determine each application, we assign a denial code. So if you got one of those two, you actually received an email from the program before we did the full launch and the announcement in the press. Additionally, our contact center reached out and called all of those homeowners with the phone number that they had originally given us in their application to be able to reach out to them again. We encouraged them to go back to the website and reassess whether maybe with those changes that they could reapply. As of the last data I have, we reached out to over 3,800 homeowners with those two denial codes. And since that, we've had almost 1,000 of them reapply. So we have proactively engaged with those homeowners and making sure that they knew about the changes themselves. The second part of the question on the NMS fund. So luckily within the federal guidelines, we did have the ability to use those federal HAF funds towards counseling. But because the state of California has such a great program with NMS, such a robust support for those HUD certified housing counselors, we weren't able to save that money, help more homeowners redistribute the money. We do leverage those housing counselors, and we actually don't limit to people that are participating under the NMS. So we contacted every single housing counseling office in the state of California. We've offered them training twice. We offered them training on the program itself before we launched. We also, with this program expansion, offered those training sessions again. We also are establishing these drop-in hours for them to be able to ask questions if they have on specific cases. So we do leverage them. As I like to say over and over, this is one of many offerings that was provided to homeowners to help, remedy their situation or cure an arrearage. We may not be the best fit for all of them, and we recognize that, but what we do want to promote is homeowners getting educated about their position, about their options, and that's through those HUD certified counselors. When you actually apply, you have to check an acknowledgement that it's free, a free service to you, that you could go to a HUD certified mortgage counselor and get your situation addressed and kind of evaluate whether this program is. So it's all over our website. We promote those counselors as much as we can. And we actually didn't limit just to NMS, though we know the services are provided and funded through that. It's all of the counselors in the state.
Okay, because I noticed, I'm speaking of the wheel, and you had the one through something, and you mentioned CBO's grassroots outreach. So you're saying that grassroots outreach it's
separate from the counselors.
It's separate from the counselors. So what type of groups are those?
The CBO network. So what we did to help facilitate kind of an ease and transition on education and data reporting is we had an intermediary. There's Sierra Health Foundation is the CBO intermediary. So the program itself works with Sierra. They did 2 RFPs with a variety of community-based organizations for those organizations to apply. It could be a religious organization. It could be like the Korean American Federation of in downtown Los Angeles. So we did try to get a swath of not only representation in the state of geographically, but also kind of when we're leveraging that kind of cultural competency aspect. If you'd like more information on the specifics of the CBOs in the network, I'm more than happy to apply it or give that to you. I just don't have it on hand.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rebecca. And I remember you mentioning Sierra Health, I think, at the last meeting in this role. So thanks for jarring my memory. Thank you so much.
No problem.
We had another comment by,
Yes,
sorry,
can you
Secretary.
hear me?
Yes, we can see.
Great. This is Tasha Kurgan. I'm here for Secretary Castro Ramirez. And we just had a couple of questions actually similar to Board Member Cabildo. So one is kind of on that question of proactivity. You have the denial codes for people who were not previously eligible, and I'm curious, you've received now, that was really a helpful data point, Rebecca, of the 1,000 applications that had been previously denied and have now come back in. Using the data that you have available and for the reasons why they were denied, how many more, what other percentage of those remaining out of 3,000 do you think might be eligible? That's part one of the question. And then two, when I was reading the board package, it was a little bit, I just got a little nervous about the premise that folks who were previously denied need to come back in to completely resubmit an application. And I wonder the extent to which we can remove barriers to people coming back in to reapply, and if there's been any space for that in how you all can do this. I know attestations and things like that would need to be updated, but beyond that, the need to resubmit information, they made it very easy. I'm interested in how we can remove barriers here, really to increase this assistance deployed.
On your first question, I think I'd have to follow up with you. I don't have the data breakdowns on the remaining 2,800 applications. I know that we've approved around 200 applications between that are within that or that upper limit on the AMI since the we redid that criteria. So we're about 200 at that 101 to 150 of percent of AMI space. But I don't have the other data, but I'll happily circulate that to you. On the application, we do require, so while we developed the application, we were very, very cognizant of, the ease of use. We survey all people who do apply to the program. We've never gotten any feedback that the application itself is, cumbersome, it's hard. We do need them to because we're doing income determination, we do need new documents, especially if they were previously denied in January, let's say, and they're applying now. So they would have to re-upload all of the documents that we require to reestablish, income, primary residence, etc. So the actual data entry of the application is very, very minimal. And so the reapplication is not, we haven't determined it to be burdensome in any way. If someone were to come back into the program and, we do have a very robust appeals process. So if someone wanted to appeal their denial, that would be one way they could go in through the program. But we're very confident that the application itself, the documents we're requiring, is not creating any sort of burden through kind of that reapplication.
Great, I appreciate that thoughtful design. So then just one more follow-up question, and it is in line with what you just shared. The Secretary and I would both love to hear more information about how this is going with the evolution of the program. Interested to see how this affects the pull-through rate, because there has been, plenty of denials, rightly so, for many good reasons. But with these program changes and just kind of reflecting on what other board members have shared, the evolution of the outreach strategy, now that you're trying to reach the previously eligible applicants, and now these higher income households who may have never thought that they would be eligible for this type of assistance, it's really, I'd offer, requires digging in and trying non-traditional methods perhaps to reach them, to help people understand that this is a program that could serve their household. I love the interface on the website, but just would love to hear about this in future board meetings so that if there's additional program pivots, and it sounds like you've already laid the foundation for great relationships with Treasury, which we also have in Director Velasquez's shop on the rent relief program. The Treasury is very impressed with how California is moving on rent and mortgage relief. So they would be amenable to more ideas if you need more program design changes. I'm not saying we need them, but just would love to continue to hear your creativity on how else we can reach those least likely to apply. So this will be an ongoing thing that we'd love to hear back on later. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we do have an informational item in the board packet, which we've committed to continuing to give. That does have the pull-through rate on the informational item. I'm always here every board meeting for any questions you may have. Obviously, we did I should say when we were designing the program, we worked very closely with your office as well as with the emergency rental assistance to leverage the lessons learned of those who forged the path before us, but we will continue that dialogue. We're committed to that.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think if I could comment on the pull-through rate, and I think, Chair, I promise this will be my last comment, but just for now, it's not just the pull-through rate of original applications, but now for folks that are newly eligible, how is that working? So I think there's some new through lines that would be insightful for us to continue monitoring. Okay, promise that's it. Thanks.
No, and I think that's very good. Ms. Johnson-Hall, if what we could do is maybe formalize the report back as opposed to just have it be part of the information that's attached to the board packages. And maybe we can have a standing actual report back either by yourself and your comments to the board, or allow Ms. Franklin an opportunity to, give us a 5-minute update on the program.
Thank you for the suggestion, Chair Delilah, as well as the other board members. We will respond accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sasha, for bringing up those points. Melissa, do we have any public comment cards on this item? I know it's informational, but sometimes we do get public comments.
So let me ask the public if there's any members of the public that would like to make a comment at this time. If you could use the functionality of the GoToWebinar and use the raise your hand function to let me know. I will be waiting to see if you have any hands raised. At this point, I don't have any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, so you'll get my attention if we do. So let's just move on item number 10. We have standing reports. Basically we have a list of 3 reports, I believe, that are included in your board packages. If there are any questions for the team, let's go ahead and raise those now. If not, you can follow up individually with Ms. Johnson-Hall. Any questions from the directors? Okay, great. The next is if there are any other board matters that the board members would like to bring up, any announcements relative to the items that are under the purview of CalHFA. If there's any comments or questions that you'd like to bring up. Okay, I know we had some board members drop off the call. So with that, Melissa, I'm going to check with you one more time to see if we have any public comments on anything on our agenda. If there was any hands raised or any other public comments.
I do not have any hands raised this time, but if someone would like to make a general comment, you can raise your hand right now and we'll recognize you. I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. So with that, I think unless there's any other items from any of the directors on the board, or Ms. Johnson-Hall, if you have anything else to add, I will consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wonderful. So hearing no objections, let's consider this meeting adjourned, and I appreciate everybody's dedication and time to our collective work. And thank you again, Dr. Vouchers, for giving us really great entertainment and more importantly, knowledge. So thank you very much.